cigars all around. Cheers, y'all.
Yeah, it starts. So. Well. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this fine radio program and podcast known internationally as the world-famous Smokin' and Toastin'. It is show number 201. We're all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. On today's show, our special guest, mixologist extraordinaire Chris Morris, will join us for the program. Awesome. And we'll be talking about cocktails. Obviously, as you can see, if you're on the live feed, you can see there's quite a bit of cocktail paraphernalia, strewn around. You think drug guys have paraphernalia. That's nothing based on the cocktail guys, I'm telling you. Chris is here. He'll be making a number of cocktails for us today, including some that you can make at home if you're finding yourself, they say people are drinking more during the pandemic, but a lot more of it is happening at home. So if you're missing being able to go out and have an expert cocktail made for you, not only will we tell you how, if you're in the Houston area, you can go and have Chris make one for you because he's working, but we can also tell you maybe how to make one or two of them at home. So that should be fun and interesting. Our program is brought to you by MyCigarShirts.com. It's a very cool website on the interwebs, which features all kind of cool shirts for cigar lovers and cigar aficionados, including at least one that probably stole its slogan from Ian.
Yes, well, that I feel like that's going to happen more and more.
I have a feeling that's going to become the bestseller, though. We'll have to ask him to send us some sales data.
What we really need to do is go back through all the old episodes and find the gems that we've said over the and
just let MyCigarShirts.com turn them into shirts. It'd be pretty fun. Well, the one that we're speaking of. That it really is a great looking shirt. It says you can't hurry up and smoke a cigar, and that's definitely an Ianism. Although I did mention last week they're going to have to do one that says I'm down like 4 flat tires and has a cigar, because that's something you say from time to time here on the show. So anyway, welcome. It's show number 201, which has us halfway to 500, and we're very excited to be here. Kind of doing this. We've been doing this for a long time now.
Well, last week's episode was quite entertaining.
Yes, it was. It was our 200th episode, but we decided, since we couldn't get everybody together like we had wanted to, that we just kind of play it low key. And then we got pod crashed by the one and only Alan Denny.
That's right.
Galveston Island Cigar Lounge, who proceeded to just completely run the show off the rails, and it was a lot of fun.
I heard from a few friends of mine who watched and or listened to the show that we did tend to prattle on a bit.
Oh, a bit. You think? You think it might have had something to do with what we were
segment
drinking?
4 was like 45 minutes long.
Yeah. Apologies for that. We haven't done that long of a segment, I think, since the 100th show.
Yeah, well, I figure the 200th show probably deserved it.
I think it was the 4th segment of show 100 where Jeremiah Butler from B&B Butchers and your friend Mark, who works on teaching people how to clean out their draft lines.
And stuff. Yeah.
They got into some long conversation about draft lines. I don't know if anybody made it through that whole segment, but it just went on and on. And I was like, I could step in and stop this, but right now I'm just enjoying this whiskey, right. And I'm just going to sit back and let him take off. So anyway, we're thrilled to have Chris on the show today.
Speaking of which, he was in between us and them.
He was, absolutely. And I will mention that sometimes before the show, I usually bring in some disinfectant cloths, and we'll because during the pandemic time it's good to be careful, so we'll wipe down the microphones and the headphones just from other people that may have used them here in the studio. And I was passing them over to Chris earlier and let him know that that's the chair Alan Denny sat in last week. And then he went and produced some kind of flamethrower from his bag of goodies and said,
"Yeah, I know you like authentic sound effects, so."
Yeah, so he used that to burn away any any remaining traces of Alan Denny on the equipment.
Nice.
So
I'm not sure if it worked.
We had a great time with Alan though last week, and he's obviously always invited back. I I always feel like if you're going to pod crash the show, we'll let you, but don't show up empty-handed.
That's
and
right.
He didn't. He brought a great bottle of rum, so it was so it was a lot of fun. On today's show, in addition to sampling a number of awesome cocktails, and I'll let Chris preview those for us in a minute, we're also going to be tasting some beers today. I don't remember if Lenny from St. Arnold mentioned this beer when he was on the show a number of weeks ago. But St. Arnold has released something called Low Dose. It's a low-calorie session IPA, and the first St. Arnold that's ever been labeled as low-calorie. So that should be interesting to taste. I haven't tried it. It'll be interesting to see how they did with that. From Cellador Ales in Los Angeles, California, we'll be tasting a Painkiller Tiki-inspired wild ale. Now, Painkillers... That's like a rum specialty drink. They make them like if you go down to the Virgin Islands or any place like that. That's sort of like the local, or I don't know if it's the local thing. It's what the tourists all drink. When we're down there. And
it's like when in New Orleans you have to drink a hurricane.
Right, it's exactly like that. Except I think a Painkiller is a lot better than a hurricane. It's a better taste. But anyway, last time I was down there, I had lots and lots of Painkillers.
But do they come in the giant, ridiculous glasses that you have to walk down the street
They
with?
don't. But we did have a very entertaining bartender who was flipping bottles around and doing all kinds of fun island chants, and it was it was your typical tourist thing. But the drinks were good. Anyway, this wild ale is called I Wish I Could Go to a Tiki Bar, and it promises to be a Painkiller inspired wild ale. So that should be interesting and hopefully delicious. And then from White Elm Brewing Company, we'll be tasting their Fluffernuttergus. It's a hard word to say. Fluffernuttergus. It's a peanut butter marshmallow Imperial Stout. So I'm sure we'll have a chance to enjoy that. Drinking News returns to the show today, as we always hope that it will. Plus, we have a few things. A lot of these are kind of like leftover things that even though we did 45-minute long segments last week, we somehow didn't get to.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk about the top 5 American rye whiskeys. The Independent Craft Brewers seal that independent craft brewers are using on their bottles and cans now. It's been out for a while. It's been over a year. How's that working? Like, is it helping for people to really be able to find independent craft beer? And is it doing what? There's a whole study that's been released on it. So we'll take a look at that. Plus, if we can get to it, the World Tequila Award winners were announced, and we'll pass along the winners of that for you. So lots of good fun things on the show today. Ian, I think you're going to just absolutely love today's drinking news. I'll just leave it at that. And we are excited about the cocktails. So it's going to be Chris. You want to give us a little preview of some of the cocktails you may be making today?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to be doing 2 original cocktails, one historic cocktail. Arguably the oldest cocktail in American history.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So,
that sounds fun.
Cool.
And then showing one classic that you can make at home and showing a variety of techniques and how they actually affect the drink itself.
And you mentioned to me that you said original cocktails, something that maybe nobody else has tasted before, that you're trying out on us for the first time?
Nobody that is not in my current employment has ever tasted this cocktail.
All right, awesome. We're looking forward to
guinea pigs.
To being the guinea pigs. Man, I'll try it. I'm down for that. Anybody that needs taste testers for their drinks, you just call me. I'll show up at your bar. We'll taste them all.
I wonder if we can make a living doing that.
I don't know.
Are there people that do that for a living?
Not really.
Should we create this?
Listen, I know there's a guy, I won't say his name. He works for one of the big companies that has a number of different stores. The guy he's a wine specialist, right? And he has a pretty high pressure job, because what he decides to buy in stock in all of their stores, if he makes the good decisions, they sell lots of wine. If he makes bad decisions, they don't sell so much. But this guy makes, and I'm not kidding you, $1 million a year. That's his salary.
Wow.
On top of that, all the wine companies fly him all over the world because they want him to taste their wines and maybe stock them.
That doesn't
think
sound
about that.
glamorous or nice at all.
I'm still really pissed off at my guidance counselor in high school. Had I known that something like that. So those kind of jobs exist. Why not cocktail tasters?
I'm going to look into it.
I think we should just print up business cards.
That's right.
Cruz and Ian, cocktail consultants. We can't tell you how to make them, but we can damn sure come to your bar and tell you if they taste good.
That's right.
Yeah. So
simple system. If we ask for another, thumbs up.
Thumbs up. I like it. It's that way. It's not too hard to explain. They don't have to sift through long reports, and we don't have to type long reports, and we might not be able to type by the time we're done with the tasting anyway. So it seems to work for me. So anyway, welcome to the show. We're so glad you're here. It's been a crazy week for me. I've been super busy. I did have time to do a little smoking, and I'm sure, Ian, you probably did the same. Is that right?
I went out to my patio this morning.
Oh, nice.
And I pulled out a cigar that I had in my humidor. I pulled out the Olla de Monterey Dark Sumatra. This is the Medianoche.
Mm-hmm.
Also blended by A.J. Fernandez. You knew that already, right?
My man, yes. I'm the A.J. fanboy, I'll tell you.
I've been a fan of the Olla de Monterey's for quite a while. I think their Dark Sumatra is an outstanding cigar. This Medianoche, I'll go ahead and give up the ghost. It's also an outstanding cigar.
Okay.
This was the 5 3/4 by 54 Medianoche. The appearance, medium brown, smooth with some veins, oily, very firm all over. The very firm thing, it had no soft spots. Like the construction was so firm all the way around that I actually spent a minute trying to find any soft spots or weird spots. None.
Yeah, nice.
The wrapper was very smooth with some veins in it, oily. The pre-light sniff on this leather, rich earth, and cedar. Very much, it smelled awesome, especially in the morning. Morning cigars kind of nice.
It's a very dark cigar.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're kind of expecting maybe some of the earthiness and leather on the
yes.
nose.
The initial light on this is rich and spicy with pepper right up front. Really nice. Cedar and leather following that up. Pretty simple until I got into the first third. Then I started getting this mocha sweetness, which appeared and played nicely with the pepper in there. It kind of had a sweet and peppery kind of thing going on, which I really enjoyed. Random spiciness going on through it. It left a tangy tobacco kind of flavor on the lips, which was really nice. A little bit of a tingle on the lips. Had a bit of a flaky ash, so I had to be careful about it. The flaky ash burned well, but it tipped off pretty easily. Although the cigar had perfect burn the entire time, like razor-like perfect burn all the way down. The second third of the cedar is prominent, followed by sweet mocha and leather. Pepper remains throughout. Flaky ash, perfect burn.
Nice.
The last third of the cedar and pepper up front. Spices and sweet mocha follow with a tangy kind of dark fruitiness that developed in the rest. I want to point out as also again perfect burn all the way through this. I want to point out this is a full flavored cigar. This is not a on the border of medium to full. This is at the high line of full.
It's pegging the needle.
Yeah, this is right in the red, and it's a big cigar, and it's smoked for a long time too. I got an hour and a half out of this cigar.
Nice.
And I wasn't smoking it gently. This cigar cost me $8.50, maybe almost $9. I'm going to give it a 6 due to its perfect burn, its awesome presentation. The whole cigar smoked amazingly. I used a punch on it, and I love it when you use a punch and you get this perfect draw from it as well. So I really, really enjoyed it. Also, it's one of these cigars that you could set down and forget about, and then it's still lit.
Yeah, I love that. 'Cause when you have to relight too many times, it really,
so it was amazing.
impacts.
So if I put it on the price to quality scale, I'm going to give it a 6.
Nice.
Because even if it was $9, I enjoyed it enough to where if I paid $10 or $12, I wouldn't have a second thought about it.
Absolutely.
If it was an $11 to $12 cigar, I would have given it a 5 easily. So
don't you get the impression that A.J. Fernandez stumbled onto some secret motherlode of amazing tobacco and has just been hoarding it all and working it into these blends?
No,
because he's got
I don't get that at all. He's actually a wizard.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it.
That's what it is.
He puts on the big pointy hat and brings out the.
His wizard hat is a much cooler hat than that.
Yeah, I was going to say
he
had that.
Is more of a fedora kind of thing.
Yeah, he really did have a cool fedora type wizard hat. When you and I met him, and he doesn't speak English, so when you and I met him, I think we were at Stogie's a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
He had come in. He had just released the broadleaf of the Encore, the broadleaf wrapper Encore, and he was there kind of promoting that. And they had a guy with him that was translating it, and I don't think I was able to get him to translate the word fanboy when I was trying to explain that I was a fanboy. But anyway, but he was very nice, and
he was super nice.
And he really knows what he's doing with tobacco. I had an interesting one this week. I smoked a Plasencia Reserve Original Corona.
All you have to say is Plasencia.
Yeah, I mean, they make great cigars to begin with. And this one is apparently one that they had in their line for a while. It went away, and they brought it back a few years ago. And it's not super expensive. It's it's reasonable, and it's got a great track record. Just want to point out, they're doing some kind of crazy work on the building. If you hear that sort of whining sound, they're not a lot we can do about it.
I wish they'd do that right outside the window.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great if they were just right outside whirring away? Anyway, we're not being chased down by police sirens. It's actually just guys doing work on the building here. In any case, this Plasencia Reserve Original is a really nice-looking cigar, a little bit rustic, kind of a medium brown wrapper leaf. And apparently, when this came out, it was the first cigar that was 100% organic. All the tobacco in it was organic, which obviously means no pesticides and all the other things. And you almost have to wonder, like, how do they even do that? Like, it's got to be much more difficult. And I would have almost expected this to be a much more expensive cigar, because you've got to figure the growing process for the tobacco is much more expensive if they've got to keep the bugs away from the leaves and all that, and are not using any pesticides. But I don't know if there are any other. I think there may be a few other cigars now that are all organic, but this one was, I believe, the first one to hit the market. They roll it in Honduras, but it has all Nicaraguan tobacco, so it's a Nicaraguan Puro. And this cigar had a very earthy pre-light. There were some cedar and tea leaf kind of notes on the pre-light. I got a little bit of red pepper once I lit it up, but it didn't give me that. This is a couple of weeks in a row now that I've had Nicaraguan cigars that didn't have that initial sort of pepper explosion. It was there, but it wasn't as big as some of the.
My cigar made up for that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it did. Any case, as it opened up, I started picking up espresso, earth, and a little bit of cinnamon, which this is my development as a cigar smoker. Is like I'm finally able to recognize cinnamon when I get a little hint of it in the aroma. So I'm kind of proud of that, even though it probably doesn't mean that much to anybody else. Anyway, the second third picked up some baking spice. A little bit of a rich sweetness started to develop, which gave it a really interesting quality, and a nutty undertone. By the last third, the cigar kind of hit its stride. There was a note of creamy chocolate that kind of worked its way into the mix. Nice complexity all the way through. I'd peg this cigar right at medium body. Just like you were saying, yours was not medium full, it was full.
Yeah.
This was not medium full, it was medium. And that's interesting because a lot of the Nicaraguan cigars coming out are on the more full side of medium. This one was not quite as powerful, but it was delicious, nicely complex. It's a $7 to $8 cigar, very enjoyable, solid 5 for me. I would be tempted to rank it higher, but that $7 to $8 category is one. That's where a lot of the cigars that I choose are kind of in that. And so if I'm trying to compare it to my very favorites in that price range, it might not be as great for me as those were, but it was absolutely solid. I found no problems with it. You can see from the pictures that there was one little bit of funky burn partway through it, and I just, touched it up and it was fine. So I enjoyed it and I recommend it. The Plasencia Reserva Original. Mine was a Corona and it was quite good. So let's take a quick break. Let's come back and get started with some cocktails. And also, I'm very, very curious about this Low Dose St. Arnold, a low-calorie IPA that I believe has just come out. So we will be tasting that in this segment as well. Chris Morris is here. He's our guest, and we'll be talking cocktails, including the history of the cocktail. Now that we had Liliana on, she told us the history of
Tequila,
the agave plant and tequila. It's fun to dig into history whenever we can, and Chris is a guy that's up to speed on all of that. So we'll be back with it next. And Drinking News is on the way. It's Smoking and Toasting. welcome back. It's Smoking and Toasting. We are thrilled to have you on board for show number 201. Our show's about fine spirits, craft beer, and hand-rolled cigars. We are joined by Chris Morris today, and we are brought to you by mycigarshirts.com. Find them on the web, cigar lover shirts starting under $20, and they are supporters of the show, so please be supporters of them. mycigarshirts.com, because cigars. I was scrolling through the comments on the Facebook feed. We were talking before we went live, but the Facebook feed was already live before we launched the show. We were talking about our buddy Chris Hart and his show, which, by the way, is called Whiskey Neat. I called it Drinking with Celebrities or Drinking with Famous People, and he chimed in and said he described it as Drinking with C-list celebrities. But he said, well, I was going to say he had some big names. He had Jean-Claude Van Damme on the show. But maybe he is a C. No, he's at least a B, right?
I couldn't even tell you.
We've never had Jean-Claude Van Damme on the. No slight to Chris
When was
Morris.
the guy made the movie? What was his last movie?
He did some kind of a series for Amazon Prime that was about being Jean-Claude Van Damme, kind of like being John Malkovich, but being Jean-Claude or something like. I don't know. I didn't ever have a chance to watch it, but. You guys can find it if you're Jean-Claude fans. It's out there. But no, Chris has a lot of great comedians on. His show's very good. They drink whiskey that you can never find in any store ever and buy. But it's definitely fun to listen to. And Chris is a good friend. By the way, I got an email from him because I'm on the email list for the Houston Whiskey Social and the Houston Bourbon Society, and basically they're saying there is going to be a Whiskey Social next year. And they've kind of got the plans in place, but they're waiting to announce the date to see if it needs to be moved later. I think what they're waiting to do, and this is like one of the greatest events ever.
Oh yeah,
Houston Whiskey Social.
Amazing.
In fact, didn't I see you in a kilt at one of those things?
You did.
Okay, that's what I thought. So if he's showing up in a kilt, you know what kind of party has been thrown, and we have repeatedly said it's the best. It's the best liquor whiskey event that you could ever go to. And I think what they're going to do is wait until they see whether or not the rodeo happens in Houston, because that'll kind of be a bellwether of whether people are getting back together and doing events again, or whether it's not quite yet time. And if you live someplace besides Houston, you have no idea what a big deal rodeo. It's like a social event.
Oh, it's crazy.
It's weird almost if you're from somewhere else. But here, it is like one of the biggest events of the year. I'm not a rodeo guy personally, but they have major bands and artists come in and play. It's a big deal.
Yeah, everyone waits for the list of artists to come out each year.
And it's there's a lot of the biggest country artists, but there's always other genres. I think Kiss played it one year.
I was there.
You were there when
Kiss.
I saw
played the
Kiss. Rodeo? Yeah, you got to love Gene Simmons. Like, rodeo? How much? I'll do it.
I've seen quite a few interesting acts there. Some great country acts, but outside country, ZZ Top.
ZZ Top, yep.
Kiss. Lionel Richie.
Yeah, you got to love that. So
Styx.
Yeah, there's all kinds of cool stuff that happens. So anyway, they're going to wait, I think, and see. If that happens, then you can pretty much count on an announcement of a date for the Houston Whiskey Social. So those of you who've been before will be celebrating and looking forward to it. Ever since the year 2010, the Ultimate Spirits Challenge has convened in the suburbs of New York to judge the best of the best across all categories of liquor. And for its 11th consecutive year, they fielded more entries than ever before. The winning tequila securing the chairman's trophy was the Tequila Ocho unaged Plata tequila.
Wow.
Beating out all other tequilas. Now, we've had Tequila Ocho on the show before. We've tasted it. It was the añejo that we had, and it was delicious. But I wouldn't have even thought, that we should go back and test the Plata. So maybe we should, because they gave it their #1 tequila award. So that's a pretty big deal.
That's pretty
I'm just
huge.
saying. So maybe
especially for a white tequila, or
right? Yeah, for an unaged,
for
an unaged tequila, that's quite a deal. So we'll have to check that out. Today we are checking out cocktails, and Chris Morris is here, and he's brought all kinds of paraphernalia. And did you want to start about talking about the history of cocktails, or you mentioned that one of these was the first sort of American cocktail? Is that right?
That's right. We'll do that one in a little bit. We're gonna wet the palate with a little something more kind of tart and refreshing, just to kind of get us going. So we're going to start off with a version of the daiquiri that we serve at my bar, Calba, right there in Montrose, that we call the Daiquiri d'Or.
And just before you go any further, Calba is open, and people can come and because people are always wondering what's open, what's not. Can I drink on the patio? What's the plan?
It is open. We do have a wonderful, spacious patio that was voted one of the best patios in Houston by like Houston Food Finder. We're at 50% capacity indoors. I do have 6 seats at the bar that are all properly socially distanced.
I love that.
2 at a time, so you can still sit at a bar and kind of get that experience. From where you sit to where I actually make drinks with a minimum of 4 feet. So it's safe for everybody involved. And, for us, it's been more or less business as usual, but with slightly less people. So,
right. That makes sense.
We've still been, keeping our stocks full and making good cocktails and serving great food.
You told me before the show you guys actually did you really just have a record month?
We did.
Even in the middle of all this?
Yeah, with having our inside capacity at 50%, we actually had the best month that we've ever had.
Wow.
That's
in August.
amazing. Wow.
How long have you guys been open?
That was October 2018.
Wow.
Is when Calba first opened.
Wow. Well, that's impressive. Now, your sort of specialty is being, the cocktail master. So this will be, I think, a really fun show.
Cocktail expert.
Cocktail expert. Yes, we should. Can
We're
we list you
collecting
among our
experts.
experts? We like thinking of our show friends as experts in one thing or another.
So to quote friend of the show and good friend of mine, Jeremiah Butler, you can call me whatever you like, just don't call me late for dinner.
Hey, we could send that slogan to mycigarshirts.com.
I love Jeremiah, but he
Yeah.
would be late for dinner.
He would totally be late for dinner. But here's the thing about Jeremiah.
He's been late to dinner with me before.
Yeah,
so.
but he would show up with an amazing bottle of whiskey.
True
And
that.
everyone would forgive him immediately, right? That's the way.
Yeah, because he didn't
that's
show
the way
up
that
late.
works.
He's the guy that showed up with whiskey. That's how you do it.
That's exactly right. So what do you? What I see you poured something in here to the shaker. What is that in that yellow rimmed bottle?
So the yellow rim bottle is a blend of rums. Something that
nice.
the kind of cocktail community learned from the Tiki bars of the 1940s.
So
where
it's not a blended rum specifically. It's rums you blended
correct.
together.
So this has Flor de Cagna 4-year as the base, and then some plantation Stiggins Fancy pineapple. So
nice.
Beautiful French pineapple infused rum.
That rum is a regular at my house.
It's fantastic.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
And then also some Barbancourt 4-year from Haiti, just to give it a little bit more of kind of like
That funk?
and earthy texture
Yeah.
and like a little bit of funk to it. It wouldn't be a daiquiri without some fresh squeezed lime juice. Fresh squeezing your citrus juice is absolutely the single best thing you can do to like elevate your cocktails.
So whether you're doing margaritas
Whether
or
you're doing-
anything, right?
Margaritas, lemon drops, anything you're doing at home, don't get the little plastic thing that is like super pasteurized.
That says that it's juice.
Yeah, that's like juice from concentrate. The single best thing you can do is juice it from an actual piece of fruit.
An actual lime or lemon or whatever.
It makes all the difference on like your shaken, your fresh cocktails.
It really does give it a fresher taste, doesn't it?
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
that real fruity aroma that will dance on your tongue a little better than the concentrated stuff. So.
Yeah, so we've got the basic structure of a daiquiri here, and it's not a daiquiri without some sugar. So we actually use 2 different types. First one being a guava syrup that we make. Just giving a little more like kind of tropical note is what we were going for. And then
So you got your rum mixture, you've got the lime juice, you said, and then the guava syrup.
and then a guava syrup. And then I always like a little bit more of like, particularly when I use aged rums, I like a little bit more of a mouthfeel with my sugar. So actually a little bit of palm sugar syrup. And what this does, palm sugar, when you make it in syrup, actually it smells like fresh baked cookies. It's really, really rad.
Nice.
Like it's like the most intoxicating smell.
Not a thing wrong with that.
But so like where the guava syrup is 1 part sugar to 1 part water, the palm sugar syrup is 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. So it gives us a little bit more body, a little bit more roundness. And it's really just kind of like more of a mouthfeel kind of thing than necessarily like super punchy like sweetness and like flavor. It's more just give like kind of the texture that we want.
And so
The detail of thought that goes into mixing something from an expert, from someone like this, is a little astounding considering I'm terrible at this. Like at home, I'm like, what do I have?
Right. Well,
I got some grape Kool-Aid.
you know, the great chefs can do that. They can go to
Yeah.
your refrigerator and gather the food that you've got and make a great meal. So I would guess that maybe the mixologist could do that too, unless you really only have grape
Well,
Kool-Aid.
you gotta really know what you're doing to go, okay, you know what, this needs a little more mouthfeel to be more fun.
Right.
And then how to approach, okay, we can do this. So that's outstanding.
So Chris, are you a measure guy or do you kind of go by feel?
It can go either way. I'm mostly a measuring guy.
Okay.
I think it's incredibly important. There are some things, right? Like if I'm making a whiskey and Coke or a gin and tonic at the house, like I'm not going to sit here and measure out like to the quarter ounce how much gin I'm putting in.
Right.
It kind of just depends on how my day's going at that point.
Well, that's a system of measurement all its own, basically.
Yeah, no. So it's funny you mentioned the Painkiller earlier, originated at the Soggy Dollar Bar, and you can get your Painkiller there with anywhere from a range of 2 to 4 ounces of rum. Depending on how much pain you need killed.
That's perfect.
So
yeah.
I do think there's a time and place for that, right? Like if I'm, at a swim up bar at a beach and I just want like, a blended strawberry daiquiri, like, yeah, put as much rum as you want. The more the better. I don't
Or if
get
you
caught
show
up
up
in
an
that.
hour later than your friends and they're already way far ahead of you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
If you arrive with Jeremiah and everybody else has started drinking, that's what you're saying, right? I get it. All right. So this is just a kind of a standard daiquiri, right?
Yeah, this is just a standard daiquiri in sort of how it's constructed, rum to lime to sugar. We're just kind of breaking it up into some different parts, using a multitude of rums to get different flavors, 2 different sugars to kind of accentuate and bring a little more kind of tropicality to it. And then we switch everything up a little bit with the garnish, but we got to shake it up first, which I'm sure you'll agree is one of my favorite sounds in the world.
Oh, it
yeah.
is a wonderful sound. And now, as you're shaking it, I'll ask you, is there a science to how much you shake?
Absolutely.
So it's possible to overshake a cocktail, correct?
It very much is, and it depends on like what kind of ice you have.
Okay.
So like that's the biggest difference between like your home bar and like my professional bar is like the ice that I have is 1.25 big cubes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm shaking on these and they're clear and they're what we call dry. They're not like super like coated in water. So like they're very easy to shake with, and that larger ice gives you a much better texture. And so if you have like that, just that regular like kind of refrigerator ice, you want to shake less because there's more surface area using small ice and things
Right,
like
so
that.
it's impacting more.
So
yeah.
all of those definitely kind of play in. One thing that you see a lot of professional bartenders do, particularly in like craft cocktail bars like I work in, this is literally a fine tea strainer that I bought in Chinatown for $1.50, and it helps keep all those like big ice shards out of your drink, so you're not chewing on your cocktail.
Okay.
There are times and places for that as well with like different shakers and whatnot. But for the general purpose, you want a nice clean cocktail.
So you pour through that. It keeps the larger chunks of ice from making their way into the glass.
I don't, for those of you who are just listening and can't see this, like,
And I don't know if the
so
camera can get a
proficient.
shot of that behind the.
Yeah.
We might have him make the drinks up there if he can, just so the camera can get.
Yeah,
a
I was
better
going to
shot.
do it on some of the other drinks. This one's a little difficult to pour. So where we actually really kind of switch things up is
He's
I like
got the little bottle with the
the little magic, the little the little tricks, if you will. And so what I like to do with this guy, and it's not that
Using
I like,
a tincture bottle.
yeah. So this is a blood orange infused olive oil.
A blood orange infused
Olive
olive oil.
oil?
I'm
Olive
pretty
oil.
sure that they don't have that at Kroger.
And so what this does is, as you drink this cocktail, some sips will be nice and tart and piquant and daiquiri and wonderful, and then just occasionally you'll get a little pop of like this oil and this kind of richness and like extra fruit that comes through.
So I can't tip this enough to show the camera the top. Maybe you can do a little better there, Ian. Don't pour it on your
I don't know
iPad.
if you can see the top of
But
this.
the top of it has these drops just kind of sitting there. The drops that you put of the olive
Right.
oil that's infused. They're just kind of sitting on the top of the daiquiri. Very interesting. Are they flavoring what's around it, or is it a flavor that you just get when you actually consume one of them?
No, it's only when you consume it. So just
Okay.
every now and again you get a little like
Because
extra,
it doesn't
extra
mix, it just sits.
Right, the oil and water don't mix, so they just sit there. And just occasionally you get kind of a little like bonus flavor.
It's interesting that oil and water don't mix. I found that out when with my ex-wife. But anyway, that's a whole other topic, and we don't have time to get into that on today's show.
At least not with the first cocktail.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We'll see who you are in a couple segments.
Segment 5, I may be telling you my life story. No, of course, now I haven't had one of the little droplets of the oil yet, but just the first blush of taste of this, there's so much flavor.
Yeah.
And I've had plenty of daiquiris. This, to me, has got a more distinct, a more, sort of lively on the tongue flavor. What should I attribute that to? Is it the fresh squeezed juice?
It's absolutely the fresh squeezed juice. The other thing that you'll notice, and I think you were able to see it a little bit on camera, is you'll look and there's like almost like a slight white crema on top of the drink, almost like
it's not
espresso.
Yeah, it's not quite like a carbonation, like a beer foam look. It's more like a cream almost.
Right, and what that is
You can actually see it stick to the glass.
yeah, and like that's a combination of like the oils that are present in the lime juice that when you squeeze it, you get out of the shell, combined with like this big ice whipping a lot of air in. And so like that's one thing that like I don't see a lot when people make their cocktails at home, and that's how I can always tell that they don't shake hard enough.
Okay.
The great Harry Craddock, which we'll talk a little bit about when we talk about history, in 1930 wrote the Savoy Cocktail Book, and there's a great quote that I like to really attribute, and it's, "We shake the cocktail to wake it up, not to rock it to sleep."
Okay. So in other words, don't be afraid to shake it hard.
Oh, you need to shake the hell out of it.
Now, I noticed that you and a lot of other of the more sophisticated bartenders that I see don't just do a 1-2 shake. It's got a little more of a rocking motion to it. Is there something to that as well?
There absolutely is. So the idea of shaking a cocktail to the best of your ability is creating as much kind of chaos inside the shaker, because you're looking to do 3 things when you shake a cocktail. You're looking to add water to it, so you're looking to dilute it down. You're looking to chill it to the correct temperature, and you're looking to add that aeration. And so,
FYI, the add water part is from the ice itself, not actually adding water.
Correct. So it's the ice melting as you beat it up, and the corners break off and they melt into the drink. And so, you'll see when I shake, it's kind of creating motion on like multiple axes. So like I hold
it's got some roundness to it.
I hold my shaker at an angle so that my ice bounces around. It doesn't just go back and forth, and it's going up and down, and then also like with a wrist motion. So it's kind of tumbling in like multiple dimensions, which sounds super pretentious, and I know Chris Hart is going to say something about it, but I don't care. I just don't care.
I'm sure he will. Now, in the last sip that I took of this, I did get one of the drops of the blood orange infused olive oil, and it completely changes.
It's like finding that
Yeah.
gushing center of a candy or something.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
absolutely fantastic.
Remember that gum that you used to have that you would chew it and there would be like no, it's not like that at all. What it does though is it gives a tartness to it that that doesn't exist when you're not getting one of those little
Right,
drops.
and I like cocktails that the more you taste them, the more you can find. Like the more layers develop.
It's just like a good cigar, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like as you drink through this, like if you really wanted to sit critically and think about it, you could probably find flavors in the first third when it's coming out and it's at its absolute coldest, and then like the second third once it's kind of warmed down a little bit, because temperature obviously affects the way that we taste things. So like there are absolutely, like I know when we do like competition cocktails, one thing that we 100% do, if you want to like really have the best cocktail you can, is I will make a cocktail, I'll put it in a glass, and I will set it on my counter, and I will walk away, and I won't taste it for an hour, because I want to make sure that if someone has to come back and taste it an hour later at a judge's table, it still tastes amazing.
Yeah, well, and obviously it's going to be warmer then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's going to change the flavor of it as well, right?
Yeah.
I think as far as I can tell, when it's really cold, you can taste the sours and the bitters and the bright fruit flavors a lot, but that tends to change as it warms up. You tend to taste more of the spices, or what's the word I'm looking for? The
rum starts to throw, show through a little bit more.
Right.
Like the more it warms up, for sure.
Is there such a thing as a really, really good frozen daiquiri?
Absolutely.
So, a lot of times when you get a frozen daiquiri someplace, it's from the frozen daiquiri machine, and I assume you can't make them without some kind of a frozen daiquiri machine, right?
You can make them with just a blender at home. That's how I do mine.
Okay.
So like the Floridita daiquiri from the Floridita bar in Cuba is a phenomenal example. And that's one where I don't measure because they don't measure. So if I measure the rum, it feels really, really inauthentic.
Is there a difference to how you prepare the ingredients for it before you run it in the blender with the ice?
So in that particular daiquiri, I use more of like a caster or just a regular white sugar. I don't make a simple, and that's just simply because that's how, they make it. They live on the beach. They're just like, squeeze some lime, throw some sugar in it. They put a little bit of Luxardo Maraschino liqueur for like an herbal backbone. They put in a cup and a half of rum, or not of rum, of crushed ice, and they start their blender. Now you'll notice we haven't talked about rum, because what they do is then they'll look inside the blender and they'll just start pouring rum
As it's blending.
So they start blending everything else, and they start pouring rum just until the middle of it starts to open up, and that's how they know the cocktail's right and the texture is right.
That's so cool.
So in that case, depending on how fast you see it opening, I've had daiquiris with anywhere between 2 and 4 ounces of rum, and they were all fantastic.
Nice.
I love it. Now, how much would it change the flavor here if you weren't using the mixture of rums that you described?
The cocktail would still be fantastic. I mean, any base spirit that you change is going to inherently change the cocktail at least a little bit. If you wanted to take this, particular drink and make it like with nothing but Flor de Caña, it would still be a great drink. It wouldn't be quite, the vision that we had, because we wanted to get as many kind of tropical fruits, and particularly for me, I wanted to make sure that we used Haitian rum, because there's a big Cajun influence in our cuisine. We're a Viet Cajun restaurant. So New Orleans Creole, Haitian Creoles, like big French influence, Plantation being a French company. Like there's a lot of like inherent conceptual things that was really important just in like the vision that we had for it. But if you just want to take like some rum, some lime juice, some guava, and some palm sugar and throw it in a glass, it's going to taste good.
Wow.
The flavor on this is so tropical good. You can
really
taste the difference between the lime. There's a little kiss of pineapple, especially on the retrohale, and then that blood orange. And once you take a sip of one of those little drops of the blood orange infused olive oil, that flavor kind of sticks with you a little bit.
This drink has most definitely what I refer to as the Jimmy Buffett effect. Jimmy Buffett has made an entire career out of making sure that when people come to his concerts, whether you like the guy or not.
Well, he makes changes in attitudes.
Yeah, changes in latitudes, and yeah. But that's his whole thing. You go to his show, and you're transported to the islands for a couple hours.
Yeah.
And this drink to me has that same kind of effect. I when I taste it, I'm like on a beach.
Yeah,
and
sure.
that's worth the price of entry for sure. On a drink like this.
I think being a bartender, you wear kind of many hats, and I say it all the time. Like, I'm a bartender, but sometimes I'm a mixologist and a therapist and a storyteller. A political expert, an ear for you to lay on, a travel agent.
Right.
And sometimes I'm just a guy that serves you a whiskey and Coke, and that's okay. Like, there's so much that's involved in kind of the art of bartending that's more than just like creating drinks. It's creating experiences and giving people like what they want. Sometimes you want to escape and imagine you're on an island. Sometimes you just want to slam some whiskey because you've had a bad day and you need somebody to like listen to you talk about your day.
Learning to recognize that, I'm sure, is its own skill as well.
So that's like there's bartending schools get a real bad rap in my industry, because people always ask me if they should go to bartending school. I'm like, absolutely not. And they're like, why not? It seems like a really good idea, right? Like, I want to do this thing I go to school for. I'm like, because all they're going to do is teach you how to make drinks. They're going to teach you how to tend bar. And all of that is wrapped up in the tending part of bartending. It's the people side.
So this is really interesting, because I have a similar thing when people, and I don't know if anybody even wants to be in radio anymore, but during my career in doing radio, people would always ask me, should I go to broadcasting school? And I told them, no.
Yeah.
Go to a college that has a good intern placement program and take some of their broadcasting courses. You don't even need to graduate. Just get placed as an intern, because when you actually are at a radio or a television station as an intern, that experience you can put on a resume, and that's going to be far more valuable to a potential employer than knowing that you completed the college course.
Yeah,
but can you do that as a bartender? If I want to be one, how do I get started then if I don't go to bartending school?
So the most common paths are going to be starting as a server, so that you learn how to multitask, how to take care of people. You know, you learn the food, you learn the drinks, so you understand what they are before you learn how to make them, or just kind of the same thing, starting as like a bar back, being the guy that polishes glasses and restocks and learns the flow of the bar.
And while you're doing that, you can like watch YouTube videos on how to make different cocktails and make stuff at home.
Yeah, and you can borrow one of the bartending books off the shelf and go home and you can learn the recipes, and then maybe you get the Tuesday night shift when it's a little bit slower.
Nice.
I actually have a few friends that started bartending that exact same path right there.
And here's to that becoming a good career path again, because right now I know it's tough because a lot of places aren't open or slower, and here's to there being a need for bartenders once again.
Cheers.
Because they serve an important public function.
We try at least.
As far as I'm concerned, you're front line. You're definitely first responders. Ian, while we're doing this tropical drink, I think it's a good time to maybe taste this IPA and see how it goes, because a good IPA is going to have a little bit of that vibe to it as well. And this is the Low Dose from St. Arnold. It's a low-calorie session IPA. And after you pour that, I'm going to have you read off the side of the can there what the calories and the
it has all the information. This is the most full can I've ever opened, by the way. Look at that.
That's quite impressive.
St. Arnold is not cheating
literally
you, folks.
straight up to the top.
They are not cheating you. Good pour.
I'm trying to pour it a little hard, but
Chris Hart is watching
He's
today.
appreciating
He'd be appreciating that. He is the champion of the hard pour. So
it's a little hard to pour that soft when it was that crazy full. This one had like 12.5 ounces in it or something.
All right. And so I'm very curious about this. I love St. Arnold. They're one of my absolute favorite breweries. And they have been they've always done really well with IPAs, but they have not been one of these breweries that sort of gave into the IPA craze and started releasing a new one every Tuesday. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but they
were careful. Their IPAs are pretty solid overall. This smells.
I love
really.
By the way, I'm currently.
There's a little dank to the smell that I really like in the hoppy smell.
I am currently, by the way, way into their Noble Haze, which we had some of when Lenny was on the show about a month ago. That's one that I'm buying every time.
So
I
this
see
says
it, so.
118 calories, 4.4% alcohol by volume. So I think they're trying to make a sessionable, low-calorie beer overall. Per 12 fluid ounces average analysis, 118 calories, 7 grams carbs, 2 grams protein, 0 grams fat.
So this has got about the same amount of calories as a Bud Light. And blows it out of the water. But then,
just the smell of it, I haven't even tasted it yet, but just the smell of it smells this is good.
I think it's really good.
The smell is good.
It reminds me of the closest thing I could compare it to is maybe the Founders All Day IPA, but it feels a little juicier. That might be because of the daiquiri still being on the palate a little bit, but
So it's interesting because it's got a thinner mouthfeel than I expect from St. Arnold overall.
But again, it's low calorie, so
and that's not really a complaint. It's just you know how sometimes you have preconceived notions when I go to taste something from Founders or when I go to taste something from Dogfish Head. You know, I expect
you're expecting a certain
something, and I don't think St. Arnold's has anything that has quite this thin of a viscosity in there.
I think that's right
in their lineup, and it's not a snap against it. I also like how it's kind of a medium carb to it as well. It's not highly overly
carbonated, yes.
And so the initial flavor on this is actually quite nice, but it is also very, very citrusy.
I know you're a craft beer guy. What do you think of something in the low-cal realm like this?
I mean, as long as it's a well-made beer, I think you can it's really kind of the world is your oyster. The thing that I'm really appreciating about this, because I agree with you, it had like a slightly thinner mouthfeel than like I would expect out of like St. Arnold's or any like reputable IPA maker. But the thing that's really striking me is the acidity that catches you like right on the side of your tongue.
It's like a little lemon peel going on there.
Yeah, it makes you want to take another drink. And this is the exact kind of beer that I would sit on my patio and have like 4 of.
Well, and
like,
it's
not even
think about easier to do that because it is so sessionable in terms of its
and under 5% is helpful too.
Exactly. Well, what I like about it is if you compare it to other beers that are low calorie and lower in carbs, this just has so much more flavor than most of them. If you look at your lineup of light beers, I mean, if you're saying, hey, I want to sit on my back porch and have 4 or 5 beers, and I don't want to, knock myself out, and what are my options? Well, you can go with a Bud Light or a Miller Lite or a Coors Light, but this has so much more flavor and so much more enjoyable while still being just as sessionable. And so I think it's a great. It also doesn't have any of that that IPA thing that some people list as the reason they don't like IPAs, that heavier sort of resinous quality to it.
No, it doesn't. This is a little bit like it's almost like they sat down and said, you know what, let's make lemonade, but with beer.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And I mean that in the absolute best way.
Mm-hmm. I like it. I like it. Now, I don't like it as well as I like as much as I like their juicy IPA or the Noble Haze, but it, you also are getting about half the calories.
I like
of
this
that,
better
so.
than Art Car.
Do you really?
I do.
Do you really? I've had so much Art Car, I'm not sure if I can be objective about it anymore. I mean, I really like it. I will say, though, that when they came out with the Juicy and then the Noble Haze, I wound up liking those better than Art Cars. But I didn't know if it was, just because it was newer, it was like, I'd gotten used to that other.
The Noble Haze, I think, might be the best IPA they've come out with.
It's terrific. It really is.
It's really good. Have you tried this?
I have not had Noble Haze, but I am a big Art Car fan, and I agree. I could not be objective in this conversation.
I've loved that for so long.
But you are literally on your own, Ian. So
Art Car's, Art Car's okay. I know you love Art Car.
I do,
and apparently you love Art Car. And I think it's fine. It's drinkable. It's a good beer, but I actually like the flavor profile. I like how this leaves the palate too. Like, I've been talking for just a minute, and it's left the palate enough to where I'm not feeling like there's any pine cone resinous going on or anything like that.
Have you gone back to the daiquiri since you've had?
I have not.
Try it out. I found the daiquiri to now be a little more tart after going to the IPA in a really good way. Like, I really like it.
Yeah, the tartness comes out.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's also because it's warming up too. Oh, there's a sweet, real sweet finish to it now that it didn't have.
Yeah, I think the guava shows up a little bit more as it warms up.
Like a syrupy sweet kind of thing on the very end of it.
Well, it sure is good. If we're gonna make it through an entire show with these, it's gonna be an Uber.
Two of my drops have merged into one Uber drop.
Oh wow, that's interesting. That's interesting. Well, I tell you what, we'll take a break. We'll finish these up during the break, and then when we come back, what's the next cocktail you want to lay on us here?
So we're gonna talk about the history of cocktails, and we're going to start by making the original American cocktail.
Nice.
Awesome.
That will be excellent. It'll be when we return. It's Smoking and Toasting show number 201, and hopefully you're watching so you can play along at home and make these for yourself. Nice. Welcome back. It's Smokin' and Toastin'. This is a program that's all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. We are having some good craft beer and some spirits mixed up into excellent cocktails. Chris Morris is our guest. He is now filling glasses with ice, and that ice sound is a wonderful sound.
So the level of detail, and he's not even talking about it because I think for him this is everyday whatever. But the fact that he uses one certain ice for mixing and one certain ice for your glass, like, he's paying attention to not only all the details that go into the drink, but the ice matters.
Mm-hmm. And
how much does
really
ice matter to you?
Ice is everything.
Ice is everything.
Yeah. So
how many different kinds of ice do you generally end up using in an evening?
In my program, we use 4 different types of ice.
4 different types of ice.
And this isn't like some sort of like one-off thing. We routinely use them. So we use what is affectionately known as Sonic Ice.
Yes.
In the colloquial. We have a machine that makes it. We have a wonderful Scotsman.
It is one of my favorite kinds of ice.
Balls of ice.
I love those.
Yeah, so we'll use those for like tropical cocktails. In this case, it has a very high surface area, so this is meant to chill these glasses because a cold cocktail in a warm glass can be quite sinful.
Yes.
We'll use what we call Hoshizaki or cold draft ice, which are these machine-made 1 1/4 inch cubes. So this is our usual production ice. This is what we shake your cocktails on, we serve your cocktails on. And then we use 2 different types of hand-cut ice at Calba. So we do some rather large, like 2-inch cubes. We freeze the blocks entirely in-house. We cut them down with a variety of saws and ice picks and dangerous equipment.
Wait, let's just back up. You freeze the huge blocks of ice.
Yeah, so we do, our blocks are about, what would that be, 24 inches by about 18. And they run about 6 inches deep, and they take about 3 days to make. But we freeze them in-house.
Wow.
I cut ice at least 3 mornings a week, cutting it down. So I do larger cubes that are about...
And do you cut out, like, there's always the top part that has the air bubbles in it that's not clear, and you cut out that section and do the clear ice? Or?
Yeah, so we use the common method of directional freezing, which is freezing things like a lake. So when you look at a lake, it's always clear on top and cloudy on the bottom. So we use insulated coolers that have the top removed, and so what happens is they freeze entirely clear, and they push all the impurities into the water, which starts to concentrate at the bottom, and then we catch it before it's all the way frozen through. So all I have to do is poke a hole, run the water off, knock off a few pieces of ice, and it's a crystal clear block.
You guys are beginning to understand why the drinks at
I've got a little
the
lunch
restaurant
cooler at
taste
the
better.
house that might become the sacrificial stick in the freezer
I
cooler.
like that. Yeah, that could work. That would be fun to play with for sure.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't require anything special. I buy my coolers at H-E-B. So.
Okay, that makes sense.
But so we do the big cubes out of there, and then we'll take a lot of the offcuts and smaller pieces that aren't quite thick enough to be a presentation quality ice, and we'll set those off to the side. We'll use those if you want like your pour of whiskey on a single rock. You'll still have a nice big piece, but it's not like a lot of those cubes are as big as this glass, quite frankly.
Right.
So an ounce and a half of whiskey on one of those is like kind of real weird and awkward when you go to like drink it, like the ice is pushing against your nose.
Cube smacks against your nose. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll use a smaller cube that's still high quality, still crystal clear, and we'll use that for some of our drinks that come in a little bit smaller glass as well.
So you mentioned the history of cocktails. Are cocktails? Where do they originate? In what culture did the mixed drink originate?
So, I mean, mixed drinks have been around forever. Like, as long as we've attempted to get drunk, we have mixed things together, which is
fairly good.
Thousands upon thousands of years. However, the cocktail, as it's known now, is a uniquely American invention, which I think is really phenomenal. The roots
Thank you, America. Cocktail and jazz.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
They go well together, too.
And hot dogs, by the way.
So it originally started, it derives from the English culture of tea. Or not, so tea then led to punches, which was you took your citrus and some sugar and some tea and some spirit and spices. And it was a way of showing off your wealth because you could afford ice and spices.
Okay, right, because spices were...
And sometimes you showed off with like brandy and champagne, but like you mixed it with whatever you had. But it was like ice and spices were like a symbol of wealth. And then that moved into the tavern where you had like the communal punch bowl. So everybody kind of drank from the one thing. The concept of the original, of like the individual cocktail as we know it, is a very American thing. It dates, the first known definition is in 1806 in the Balance and Columbia Repository, where it was defined as a cocktail as a stimulating liquor composed of a spirit of any kind, sugar, water, and bitters. And if that sounds like an old-fashioned, that's because that's what it is.
That's why they call it the old-fashioned, right?
Yeah, so the best-known origin story that I know for the old-fashioned is that at some point, somebody was really angry at people like creating what was called like the improved whiskey cocktail, where you're adding like maraschino and absinthe and basically like tinkering with it. And so eventually there was like, I just want a whiskey cocktail the old-fashioned way.
And that's where it came from.
And so that's kind of where it comes from, is like it is the quintessential definition of a cocktail.
So is the old-fashioned essentially the first cocktail, or did something precede it?
I mean, it would have been the first definition of a cocktail, but what we widely recognize as America's first cocktail is the Sazerac.
The Sazerac.
And we can more or less date this in or around to about 1838 in New Orleans.
Wow. Of course it's New Orleans.
I went and toured the Sazerac, I'm going to put air quotes up here, brewery in New Orleans when we were there at the Valentine's Day.
Right. It was just about the last time you could go to New Orleans.
I say brewery because I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they're not brewing it there anymore. It's just like the Sazerac house.
Right. But
Yeah, so the Sazerac house is more of a museum these days. So it originated with an apothecary named Antoine Amédée Peychaud, in 1838, and he was creating a medicinal bitters that we now know as Peychaud's bitters. And so he started mixing up this cocktail in his apothecary shop, and eventually it became popular, and they began serving it at the Sazerac Coffee House. His original, the original apothecary was on Royal Street. I think it was 437 Royal. And then the Sazerac House, where it stands now. So a fun thing, there were over 200 coffee houses in New Orleans that day because they didn't like calling them bars.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
yeah. So they were coffee houses.
They have no problem calling them bars today.
They didn't sell a ton of coffee.
Yeah.
Right.
For pure historical record.
Understood. Yeah.
But the cocktail itself, we know it now as being a rye whiskey cocktail, but it was originally, the name Sazerac comes from a cognac, Sazerac Forget Fille.
Okay.
And that's what it was actually named after. And the Sazerac House was known because the owner was like an importer of Sazerac brandy. Now, where everything went wrong and where I like kind of two worlds colliding is if you talk to anything about wine history, you learn about the louse of Phylloxera, which was this vine louse that destroyed like 75% of the wine vines in Europe in the 1880s. And so if you don't have wine, you can't make brandy. And we're Americans, and we want to get drunk. And so if we can't get brandy, we start looking for the next thing, which in our case was rye whiskey.
Okay. There you go.
So that was like two kind of worlds colliding right there, which then leads down to like other problems with like the abolition of absinthe also has to do with the wine industry crumbling. But
It tickles my memory a little bit. You're telling a story about the vines, and wasn't there a Texan who developed
yeah, talking about Raymond Hack.
Is that what we're?
Yeah, whose winery was just invested in by Houston Cougar Case Keenum, by the way.
Kidding.
Yeah, that's
No
it.
kidding.
Actually, in my hometown of Santa Fe.
Okay.
Raymond Hack is a friend of mine's grandfather. Small world gets smaller. But yeah, no, he worked on the Blanc de Bois grape, which was like completely resistant. Now, how the wine world eventually rebuilt was they took French grapes and spliced them onto American rootstocks, because our roots wouldn't get attacked.
I had this story kind of floating around. Thanks for doing it. I couldn't remember exactly, but that's awesome.
Now you sprinkled. I'm watching you making this cocktail while you're explaining. You sprinkled something in. Is that the bitters?
That is the bitters.
Okay.
And a lot of people ask me like, what is bitters? And I like to describe it like the salt and pepper of the cocktail world.
Okay.
So it's these really intense kind of macerations of fruits and spices, and we literally just add them like dashes.
They're pretty intense if you try them on their own.
Yeah, for sure. Now, when I go to my specs down in Midtown and I go to look at the bitters, there's all kinds of bitters, and I get confused. So where should you start if you wanted to make good cocktails? What's the good first couple of bitters that you should have in your home
So for
bar?
99% of your cocktail making career, you only need 3.
Okay.
So you need Angostura, which is the classic aromatic bitters, lots of cinnamon, lots of clove. You need Peychaud's, which is more of like it has more of like a fennel and anise kind of quality to it, known for like its very vibrant red color.
Is that the one you just used on this?
That is the one that I use here. And then you need orange bitters.
Yeah.
So orange bitters,
Peychaud's, and Angostura.
and Angostura. Okay.
And to buy one of each of those will run you less than $30, and they will those 3 bottles when you buy them will last you
Forever.
months, if not years.
Okay.
Unless you go through them at like absolute terminal velocity, like a professional bartender does.
I love absolute terminal velocity. All right, so this is the Sazerac that you're mixing up.
Greg
What have you put in here?
Duxakis says that's a sexy bottle of cognac.
Yeah, I had a feeling he might like that. So tell me again what you've put in here so far, and then I want to ask you about stirring it rather than shaking it.
Yeah. So this far we've put some spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So we've used Pierre Ferrand 1840. So
That's a lovely spirit.
a little bit higher proof, which is why Pierre Ferrand developed this, was to make cocktails and historically correct cocktails. We added some sugar. In this case, we used a turbinado sugar, 2-to-1, a little bit more kind of rich, complements that like oak and that toasty note. We've added some ice, so we've added our water, and we've added our bitters. So we've added Peychaud's. So right now we've basically got a fancy old-fashioned. But what separates the Sazerac from everything else, on top of the Peychaud's, is its signature rinse of absinthe.
All right, so I was going to ask you about the stirring, but let's talk absinthe for a second.
I was going there too.
I knew we were going to get into the absinthe discussion.
So everybody wants to know, what is the deal with absinthe? Why is it such a big deal? Why is it banned? Is it banned?
I feel like you just Jerry Seinfelded that one.
Yeah.
What's the deal with absinthe?
What's the deal with
So
the
it-
absinthe?
So it's not actually banned. So
Okay.
it was originally banned in 1912 because there was a story that came out of a guy that drank absinthe and then went on like a murdering spree and like Chris Benoit his family.
Okay.
And they were basically like, nope, can't have that. But then it came out like he had drank like a lot of brandy and had done like, morphine.
Well, there's always that. Yeah.
And then they sponsored this big study by a scientist to basically say that absinthe was evil. And by they, I mean the wine industry, because their sales were crumbling a little bit.
No politics in there.
I know, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, you thought we were going to get away without politics on this show. Yeah, so a little bit of creative lobbying, a little bit of like obscuring the truth, and next thing you know, absinthe was deemed illegal. And it remained so until 2007 when a research scientist from New Orleans, bringing it all back home, a guy named Ted Breaux, who's a really fascinating individual. You'll be walking around New Orleans with him, and he's like, that cannon once shot somebody in 1832. And then he'll talk about like shooting squirrels in his blinds. And
Yeah.
you're like,
And it's all the same to him.
and it's all like, but he's an insanely talented research chemist. And so he went back and got like his vintage absinthe and like proved like the levels of, because there's a chemical that's said to be present in absinthe called thuhone that everyone says is hallucinogenic.
That's the wormwood.
That's comes from the distillation of grand wormwood, and it is hallucinogenic. However, for you to ingest enough thuhone or thujone for you to actually start hallucinating, you would long be dead from alcohol poisoning.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Because absinthe, like the one we're using here, is 130 proof. Like it's incredibly high alcohol, and it has to be. And so, yeah, if you sit around in Parisian cafes for 4 hours a day drinking 130 proof spirit and doing opium, like you'll probably cut off your ear. Like that's kind of a thing. I mean,
Makes sense.
I've literally been to a party with Jeremiah Butler, and we drank absinthe that is well above the American legal limit, and we had multiple pours of them. And you know what happened? We got drunk.
I was going to say.
You showed up late?
Okay, let me
we showed up late with a bottle of whiskey.
make sure I get this story straight. You were with Jeremiah, and you got drunk.
It's in New Orleans.
In New Orleans. I don't know how that happens. I do have one and only one absinthe story, and it dates back to a time when I was in Washington, D.C., running a radio station there. One of the guys that worked for me...
That was the absinthe that you just sprayed in there. Huh?
That is.
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
sorry.
so the absinthe was
could smell
sprayed.
it, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's traditionally rinsed in the glass. Some people say for aroma. A much more common theory is that it was just the highest proof thing they had around, so it disinfected the glass.
Yeah,
I'm sorry
that
to interrupt
works.
your story.
Yeah.
So
sorry.
I was in Washington, D.C. I was running a radio station there, and one of the guys that worked for me was a huge fan of Marilyn Manson. And Marilyn Manson was coming to town, and he begged me to try to set up an interview. So I went through all of the hoops that you had to jump through, and what we had to agree to do the interview was Marilyn would only do it after his show, so at like basically 2, 3 in the morning, by the time the show was over and everything was done. So everybody had to come in to the station at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I went up to just make sure everything went okay, and it did. Marilyn was very nice. He was very accommodating, but he brought with him to the studio a bottle of absinthe and sat and drank it during the interview, and I couldn't help but think it was just totally for effect. I mean, maybe he really did like it. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that he was just trying to be weird. You know what I mean? Like he wanted that to be part of his narrative, part of his story that he was doing absinthe. So, but that's my only real absinthe story. I'm not a huge fan of the whole, licorice anise heavy smell. So it's never really appealed to me too much. But sometimes in certain things like this, it could work.
Just going back to the Marilyn Manson story, there was a Onion article headline that said Marilyn Manson going door to door to find new people to shock.
It doesn't matter how shocking you are. It all does wear off eventually, doesn't it? All right, so this is the Sazerac.
This smells awesome.
Yeah, so
It really does.
So this is the Sazerac. This is America's original cocktail. I know we got a little bit off on cocktail history there.
Well, yeah, but it's got an almost floral nose to it, though.
Yeah, so this is also finished off with a little bit of lemon oil as well, which complements all that like anise
I love this.
and fennel.
Yeah?
I love this.
Yeah.
And
The
like
cognac.
and this is the traditional way to serve it. You serve it in what we call down, which is a rocks glass with no ice. So
And you, before you poured this, you had ice sitting in all these glasses for a while to cool
To
the glass
chill the
down.
glass.
yeah, because
And then
what's
you dump
happening
the
is we're
ice.
putting a cold cocktail in here, and I want this cocktail to stay cold. So and when we do it at the bar, we actually keep these glasses in the freezer, so they come out like
Right.
completely frosted over.
Ian, you're right. This is absolutely delicious.
The cognac is so good in here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it makes such a difference, and it's a completely different drink.
Yeah, so this was kind of the birth of the American cocktail, was the Sazerac in the 1830s. And then
Wow.
throughout the 50s, you start to see more of a development. We have the first bartender's book, the first cocktail book published 1862, Jerry Thomas, the professor. And that just explodes the craft. The other thing that really helps is the commercial ice trade. It became much easier for people to get ice, so you can make cocktails,
Right, so you can make cocktails, yeah.
in bars. And then from 1860 to about 1910 is what we call sort of the golden age. That's when like you start seeing the old-fashioned being a thing. The daiquiris developed in 1890. You have the Manhattan, you have the martini. These all come to be cocktails in that age. And then in 1919, well, we messed the whole thing up.
Oh, what happened?
Prohibition.
Prohibition,
That
yeah.
whole prohibition
okay,
thing.
yeah, that sort of puts a damper on it.
Interesting enough, we messed it up, but it was a good thing for the rest of the world, basically, because all of our talented bartenders left, and they went over to Europe and Japan and Egypt and all these other places, and Cuba. So they left town and they kept bartending, and so it did a lot. You started seeing a lot more citrus in cocktails during Prohibition because we weren't getting the best booze. So we had
So
to kind of
you had to flavor it a little bit more. Yeah.
Anybody who's had to dispose of some booze after a party knows you got to kind of obscure it to get it down. A little bit
Right.
of sugar to help the medicine go down, if you will.
So I'm guessing that once Prohibition was repealed and the bartenders started coming back, they'd learned quite a bit while they were abroad about things that were happening
so the
in other
craft
countries,
had
right?
continued to develop, but the problem is like we repeal in 1933, and then obviously by like 1940 we have kind of an unstable world thing, and like the U.S. is recovering from a depression at that point, so there wasn't a whole lot kind of developing. It was more like private clubs and things. So then you hit World War II, and then after that we have a reasonable economic boom. So we have the 50s and the 60s, and this is your James Bond, who we'll talk about when we talk about bartending at home. I have a lot to say about James Bond. But you start seeing more, and what happened, and because I did a lot of reading, and I've always wondered, like, how did we go from like the martini and the gimlet and these beautiful cocktails to the abominations that we were all raised on? How did we get there? And what happened was it was a de-emphasis of the bar. That's because with that economic boom and with more of like the industrialization of America, people started moving more to the suburbs, so they started entertaining more at home. Now, if you're preparing to have friends over and you're putting together a beautiful spread of canapes and you have your cocktail dress on, like, you don't want to get lemon juice on yourself. So people started making it easier for you to entertain at home, and that's where you start seeing like sour mixes and things start coming. And so that we kind of denigrate the cocktail through the 50s and 60s, and then 1970 hits and disco hits, and then everything's color and crazy, and we lose our minds and we start making
Are you suggesting that disco made everything
and it becomes
better?
shots, sex on the beach, and that kind of stuff,
no,
right?
I'm actually saying exactly the opposite.
Oh,
But then what kind of happens is, so that's where we get into like the 1980s, and you just start, everything becomes a martini, and it's up, and it's blue, and it's colorful, and you're like your sex on the beaches, and you sugar, and we kind of lose the art and the balance and like the skill of craft bartending.
Was it the early 2000s where that
So where it
started to come back?
So where it first started to come back was the very, very late 90s. When
Okay.
you have bars like Milk and Honey, at least in the U.S. Like everyone else was like still doing just fine. Just we had to reclaim our craft, and so it was like 1999 is when the seminal bar Milk and Honey in New York was first open. It was like right next to a mahjong parlor in like a poor part of town, and it was a guy that just wanted a bar with like 12 seats to make drinks for his friends. But the way that I like to describe it, right, is all the drinks that we had been making were hair metal, and then like the craft bartending world came in as like a very well-dressed Nirvana. And it was just like bad attitudes, and we're not doing anything like you've been doing it. We're not doing the bright colors. Like
Right.
we're raw. We're doing it old school. We're doing it the right way. Like we're having rules, and we were kind of pretentious assholes for a while, quite frankly, but we're over that now.
So I was going to ask you about this. I used to go to a little spot here in Houston, and I won't name it because I don't want to trash them at all, but they were so particular about this particular bar, about what the ingredients were.
Was
and
it on Westheimer? They're much nicer these days, I promise.
Well, they were so particular. They made great drinks, but I always wondered if it wasn't just a little more precious than it needed to be. And I haven't been back in a while, so but I did enjoy going there.
The name of the bar, is it like a blacksmith tool?
I don't want to say the name of the bar, but it rhymes with Ranville. So no, but
I highly encourage go on like a Tuesday, give them another
I loved the drinks
I've been
they
there
made.
a few times actually. And
I
had
love
good
the drinks they made. Don't get me wrong.
Well,
and my experiences were good, but it always seemed so precious. I mean, they were only squeezing the juice of a lemon from the west side of a tree that was grown in a grove that was in a certain.
They're
part
selling
of
you the story.
I get it. It just. Sometimes it seemed a little
and it
much.
was only watered with unicorn tears.
So my question to you
hard
was:
to make a unicorn cry.
Was that legit?
Very difficult.
Was that why the cocktails were so good? Because they were being that precious about it?
I mean, they were just doing the same thing that I'm doing here. They were just taking it and paying attention to it and putting craft and passion into it, and
you couldn't fault them for that. That's for sure.
But I think at a point, and luckily we're past it. Thank God. I think every city, when they start to kind of get into the cocktail revolution, has to go through like its pretentious bartender phase, because otherwise, like, people just don't get it. Like you have to be okay for like 6 months to a year. Like if you're coming in, you're saying like, I found these cocktails and I want to make cocktails and I want to share this with everyone that I know in, I don't know, Boise, Idaho, or like Bismarck, North Dakota. Like, if you want to be the first ones there, you have to be okay with like 6 months to a year of telling a lot of people, like, no, like, I don't have that. I don't have the ingredients to make this. And like, from a business perspective, like, you want to make everybody happy and you want to make money. But like, if you stick to your guns and you have a clear vision, eventually you don't have to be that way, because then people come and they find you out.
Because of that.
Right. Well, one of the things I loved about Anvil when I used to go there, when I was single.
Ranville.
And Ranville, yeah.
Ranville.
One of the things I loved about it, though, is not only were the cocktails good, but they had great selections of craft beer. And I actually got to witness a guy come in and ask for a Budweiser, and it was the first place I think I'd ever been where they said, no, we don't have Budweiser. And I was like, yes! Like, they really had a commitment to there being a certain level of quality. And maybe it was a little snooty, but at least on the beer front, I understood it, and it was a good thing. Anyway, I'll have to go back there because they made some great drinks.
I don't know, like they're one of the best. I mean, they're up for like the 9th year in a row for like potentially Best American High Volume Cocktail Bar at the Tales of the Cocktail Spirited Awards. And like, they've been a James Beard semifinalist for like their bar program year after year. And like, I know the era you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, they were assholes. I was an asshole in those days. All of my friends were jerks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we all kind of had to be for a little bit, just to like show people like, no, we are taking this seriously, and like,
right,
you're going
this
to listen.
Is a thing.
And like, and we're super passionate, and like,
and you did
just
believe
go with it.
that they were serious about it. That was the good thing. All right, I tell you what, this has been a long segment. We're going to take a break. We'll not taste the beer in this segment. We'll do that when we come back. In fact, we'll open up the next segment with this beer because I'm actually really excited about being able to taste this particular wild ale. It's the one called I Wish I Could Go to a Tiki Bar. So I thought it'd be a perfect thing to bring along while we're doing cocktails. So we'll come back and we'll do that. It's Smoking and Toasting. Our guest is Chris Morris, and just like last week, I think this is going to be a long show. The Shamo didn't work, did it? Fortunately, you're still enjoying that
I
cocktail.
hate this.
I can tell.
It's empty.
You've hated it all the way to the bottom of the glass. Welcome back. It's Smoking and Toasting, show number 201. We're doing cocktails today. Chris Morris is our guest, and we are brought to you by MyCigarShirts.com, the coolest shirts for cigar fans of all sizes and types. Starting at under $20. Grab them for yourself. or for anybody you know that loves cigars, at mycigarshirts.com. They are a supporter of this show, so please help us by supporting them. We appreciate you coming in for the show. Ian, we have got a special beer. At least it looks like a special beer to me.
This, I think, is a special beer. It says, I wish I could go to a tiki bar, Painkiller Tiki-inspired wild ale, single barrel syndicate, it says underneath that.
It's from Cellador Ales in,
then it says,
in Los Angeles.
And then it says...
Oh, it says something about rotate the bottle,
gently
right?
rotate this bottle to get the juices into suspension.
Into suspension. I like that. That sounds like something that you might say, Chris.
I know,
get
right?
the juices
And
into
then
suspension.
it says, garnish with fresh nutmeg, and it has this little baggie.
Oh, so that's nutmeg in the baggie? I didn't know. I thought it was a decoration.
No, I think we're going to garnish
Well,
this
I will say this: when you
fresh
have
ground nutmeg.
when you have a painkiller, when you're at the
The Soggy Dollar Bar.
Soggy Dollar Bar, yeah, that's what they do is they sprinkle the nutmeg on top of the beer.
It's like one of the absolute defining elements.
Absolutely.
If it doesn't have nutmeg, it's not a painkiller.
So they actually send nutmeg along with it. That's
you don't happen to
awesome.
have a grinder with you, do you?
I don't.
I got a pocket knife.
Are they like solid chunks of nutmeg? Is that what it
It
is?
is a nutmeg.
It is an actual nutmeg. Wow. Okay. Well, you can maybe flake a little bit off with a knife into the top of the bottles. I just want to say, I don't know what they're doing to our building, but it sounds like the Nazis are about to drop bombs. That sounds like an air raid siren to me. I don't know what that is, but I apologize for that in the background of the show
There
here.
we go.
Ian, you are the master. See, you're that guy that always has the right tool for the right occasion.
Called a pocket knife.
Yeah, but it works.
This
doesn't
is the kind of ridiculous level of detail that I appreciate on the primal level.
it? That's awesome. And on Smoking and Toasting, you wouldn't necessarily expect that, so it's
Yeah.
pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So, Ian, while you're grinding up the nutmeg here, this beer looks to be something really interesting. I will say we've had a number of very interesting beers on the 200 plus episodes of this show that we've done,
This
but
nutmeg
we've
smells
never
good.
had one that came with a nutmeg nugget.
You know who else wishes they could go to a tiki bar?
Who?
Me.
You know who else wishes they could go to a tiki bar?
You.
Everybody. Everybody. It's just, there is a little tiki bar in North Hollywood, Los Angeles. I can't think of the name of it. I found it when I was there on a business trip once, and that was one of the coolest places I've ever seen. Had little volcanoes in the back, kind of like when the Florida Canya people came on the show. You know how they had that little volcano that they brought with them? It was very much like that. It was just, man, it was a fun place to spend an evening. But a real honest-to-God tiki bar is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I understand. I completely relate to I wish I could go to a tiki bar. So I would say, Ian, as you're pouring those, it comes out looking kind of like maybe an amber or a blonde. It's a pretty light color.
It's a very, very bright straw color.
Yep, it really is, and it's got a nice little bit of foam on the top. Nice for you to be able to float some of that nutmeg on it, I think. And so you already shaved off some shavings of the nutmeg, correct? I am really curious. Now, wild ales in general are just a totally... we only do wild ales occasionally on the show, and they're always really interesting and different. But I wouldn't have guessed this tiki painkiller-inspired thing would be based on a wild ale. But it's going to be interesting to see what it tastes like. Man, I will say on the nose, it does smell a bit like a painkiller.
The nutmeg is so fun.
Maybe it's the nutmeg that gives you that floating on the top of the foam here.
Make my
but-
pocket knife smell good.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. It's always,
I do keep it reasonably clean, just
always.
in case you're,
I appreciate that.
just
we,
in case you're
we
wondering
all do.
what I've dragged my pocket knife through.
So I
Do
most.
we need to sterilize it?
I think maybe so. Yeah, I most certainly do wish that I could go to a tiki bar. I think we all feel that same way. So
This smells so
it'll be
good. Have you
interesting
tried
to
it
see.
yet?
Does this transport us there? No, I've only smelled
Chris
it.
went first.
Chris has gone first. Thoughts?
That's good.
Oh.
That's real good.
Is that kind of good?
Well,
I mean,
Wow.
it doesn't have like.
Did I garnish that well enough?
You did.
You did a great job,
You did a
actually.
phenomenal job, particularly under the circumstances.
the pocket knife comes to the rescue. So my take on it is that it's all painkiller up front and all wild ale on the
back.
finish. Yeah, because you get that sort of farmhouse vibe once you are, about to swallow, and then after on the retrohale. But up front, you just get that. It is almost like you are drinking a painkiller.
Yeah, it doesn't have like the body of a painkiller, but it nails that pineapple orange.
Yes.
like
But I think
tropical
they made
note.
up. I think they made up for that body with this is really highly carb.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And it kind of brings a little more up front.
And I'll say a lot of times when you have a beer like this, if it has this much carbonation, that's a strike against it for me. Like I think
For sure.
I think they have, and there's some IPAs, even like some hazies that I've had that are like, this would be really good if they backed off the carbonation a little bit. But in this case, the carbonation really works.
What kind of adds to it? I like the way the nutmeg kind of floats around in the palate after you take
Yeah.
a sip.
Yes, absolutely does. You get wild ale, and then here comes the nutmeg.
This
Yeah.
is what I would call coarsely ground nutmeg.
This may be one of the single most interesting beers we've ever had on the show. Like,
Agreed.
you know what? And we've
It
had
came
some,
with a nutmeg bag.
we've had some crazy stuff, but this is just awesome. Well, I'm so glad that we were able to try this. The brewery is from Los Angeles, and I will admit I don't know that much about Cellador ales, but I am going to go and investigate them because when I think of the LA beer scene, to be honest, I think of a lot of West Coast IPAs. You think of outfits like Stone. You think of, even though there's San Diego, not Los Angeles, but you think about those kind of breweries, 805, Firestone Walker, those guys that make, some really good but more mainstream beer styles. This is completely off in a different corner. Yeah.
Blend of wine and whiskey barrel aged wild ales infused with roasted coconut and orange zest, and you get all of that going on. That's true. And bottle conditioned with Dole pineapple juice. Is Dole the highest quality ingredient we've ever used? No. It's fucking delicious. That's what it actually says
That's great.
right here.
Is it the highest quality ingredient we've ever used? No.
I will
But
say
it's fucking
that this would
delicious.
not be the same cocktail or the same beer without that nutmeg.
Yeah.
It honestly makes
The nutmeg really does
Well,
add, I
there's
think.
a reason, that they actually include the little pouch and the
Yeah.
nutmeg piece with the beer. That's phenomenal.
This is an 8% as well.
It's one of those things that I wish everybody that I know that likes beer would have a chance to taste this. You just I just want to share this.
I have more
this
nutmeg
taste.
here if you need some.
I just want to share this taste with other people. And I'm not. I enjoy wild ales occasionally, but it's not something I go to a lot. Wow, this feels like a special treat, though.
Yeah, no, this is one of those beers that look how much we're talking about it. This is one of those that inspires conversation, and I absolutely love beers that do that. That makes me very happy.
Well, it's like it really reminds me of the first time that you and I got together. I don't now remember what beer it was, but whatever we were trying that evening was something we kept talking about and talking
Yeah.
about and talking about in the same way. And
I also have to say, like, they didn't spare expense on this beer. Like this, even though it's just a little thing with a nutmeg, it can't be cheap to make this happen on every bottle. Not
On
only
every single
just
bottle,
paying
yeah.
someone to sit there and tie this to every single bottle.
right.
I mean, down to that simple.
You know
thing.
what I really love about this though is that this is a beer. If you manage to get your hands on one of these, do not drink it at home by yourself. Save this for when you're hanging out with a friend or a buddy, and you can actually have this kind of conversation
is a great
about
conversation beer right here with the nutmeg especially.
it. Wow. So our mission for the next couple of weeks is to find out more about Cellador ales, because unless this is a weird one-off, can you imagine if they're doing a number of different beers that are as interesting as this one?
Yeah, even
have
if
to
it
try
doesn't come with nutmeg or whatever.
Right.
That's, that's so cool.
If it's just even as remotely interesting
Yeah, I
as
was
this.
like, I'm on the hook. Like,
Yeah. Totally.
They've got their claws.
Yeah,
like, in
for sure. Cellador ales
That's so
out of
interesting,
Los
so cool.
Angeles. So, Chris, what are we working our way towards cocktail-wise here?
So when we started talking about like what we could do, as you mentioned, alcohol consumption has gone on
Even better as it
at
warms
home.
up.
And so I thought we would talk about just how to make cocktails at home.
Okay, because it is different. I mean, if
It
you're at
is.
home, you don't have the multiple ice selections and some of the things that
Yeah.
that you're talking about that you do.
When I make cocktails at home, it's usually 2 parts whiskey.
That's your general rule.
That's it.
Yeah.
No, that's the actual
Oh,
cocktail.
that's the actual cocktail. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Well, I make a decent
I
margarita.
don't mess that one up.
I make a decent margarita, and I'm proud of my dirty martini. But beyond that, I'm a complete cocktail novice.
Yeah.
It's just, and I think those are on the cocktail scoreboard some of the easier things to make.
I mean, they I mean, all cocktails are easy to make. Have you seen what I've done? Like, I've literally just used this thing and filled things up to lines and made them cold.
Yeah, that's
The intrinsic part of bartending is all the rest. I can teach you how to do everything that I've done in like 10 minutes.
But it still feels a little like Tom Brady saying
But
it's
he's a
easy
good
to throw
listener.
the football.
Exactly. No, for sure. But I say that, like, yes, when I do it and I have the really nice, like, Japanese, cut glassware and like all these like artisanal bar tools, like that's all part of the experience, and like you just naturally are going to think it's better. It's like
I think that's
We
true.
do
by the way.
drink with our
Right,
eyes. I mean,
like,
that's a natural thing.
Like, if you watched AJ Fernandez hand roll a cigar and hand it to you, it doesn't matter if he was using like floor sweepings. You're going to think it's fantastic,
And I'm going to smoke it and love
and you
it.
are going to smoke it
Totally.
and you're going to look him
Totally.
you're going to look him in the eyes and just say El Mejor, El Mejor.
Yeah, El Mejor.
Like
Fanboy. How do you say fanboy in Spanish?
yeah. So like it's naturally going to seem better, but like you can still do the very base functions of what I do at home. Like the cocktail we're going to make here, we're going to make a Manhattan 2 different ways, and it's three things, including 2 parts whiskey.
I love that.
You were 1/3 of the way there, sir.
All right.
You're almost there.
This is going to be my next mixed drink at home.
If you're 1/3 of the way, yeah, this is something you can do.
Because I've nailed the 2 parts whiskey drink.
Yeah, I understand.
And most of the jiggers that you can buy, the measuring tools that we use, are 2 to 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you literally, this is as hard as it gets to mess up. So it's an incredibly simple cocktail. It comes with a really great heuristic so that you can't mess it up. So the recipe that we use is 2-1-2. 2 parts whiskey to 1 part vermouth, 2 dashes of bitters. How do you remember that? It's the area code for Manhattan, 2-1-2.
So 2 parts whiskey,
Yeah.
1 part vermouth,
1 part sweet vermouth.
sweet vermouth. Okay.
Sweet vermouth. So
And
vermouth,
what's the difference between sweet and dry?
1's sweet.
And 1's dry.
All right, so it's a little
Okay.
more,
We
it's
had
a little more
vermouth on
complicated
the
than
show
that.
at one
Okay,
point.
so vermouth was all it all started as a way that basically to preserve wine that was good, that was going off, that was going stale. So vermouth actually translates to wormwood in German.
Okay.
And so you would basically take like old champagne stocks and you would fortify them with like additional brandy, and you would infuse them with like herbs and spices so that you could drink them, usually with like soda water. And then we got them in the States and we took them to their final form, which was we made cocktails out of them, namely the martini and the Manhattan.
I was going to say, do you use vermouth in your martinis?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I had a long existential crisis determining the 4 cocktails that we're going to do today, because I really wanted to fit a martini in.
Well, okay, so in a way I'm glad you didn't, because I'd like to just say now, we'd love to invite you back. And either we can have you do both of these, or maybe we have someone else
Can I
show
interrupt
up.
you? I like martinis. I think martinis are wonderful.
Yeah.
He likes some weird cold drink made out of vodka.
Okay, so this is what I'm getting at. I would really love to have a drink-off between gin martinis and vodka martinis.
I'm so here for this.
So are you a gin purist? Are you a guy that does not accept the vodka martini as an acceptable kind of
I
martini?
mean, I accept it as a thing that exists. I don't believe it's in any way, shape, form, or fashion on par or superior to a gin martini.
Okay, so here's the thing.
Matter of fact, it has its own name.
Vodka martini.
No. Vodka martini, as defined by Playboy in the 1960s, is called a kangaroo.
I knew I should have read the articles.
Wait, you didn't?
No.
Well, I obviously did.
Clearly. Okay, so all right, so here's the thing. Let me put out the call right now. If you are
Told you I read them, Dad.
If you are listening to the show, well, I told my dad I read them too. If you are listening to the show and you are someone who feels like you make a great vodka martini, please contact us, because we'd love to have Chris come in, make the gin martini, have you come in, make the vodka martini, and we'll taste them all. That can't be a bad thing, Ian.
0% chance that it's bad.
Oh, yes. Okay.
No,
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
no. I'm not claiming victory.
Okay,
no,
gotcha.
I know.
All right. Yeah, and it's not even really a contest. I just want to
Yeah, I mean,
No, because you're making a martini or a cold vodka drink. They're
Right.
not even the same thing.
All right, so we'll contrast and compare.
Knew I
and
liked
that's
you.
okay. Yeah, and that's okay. Yeah, yeah.
So the one thing I will point out about vermouth, and it's particularly, it hasn't done much to the Manhattan, but it's basically killed the proper gin martini. Because how many people do you know that say they don't like vermouth? The thing is, vermouth is a wine product, and we forget that. Once your vermouth is open, it needs to be in the fridge. It needs to be kept cold.
Even like a dry vermouth should be kept cold.
Absolutely.
Okay, good to know.
Absolutely. I mean, they have a little bit of like brandy added to them. They're relatively fortified, so they'll survive for a little bit. But they are a wine product. They will spoil, just like your white wine will spoil. If you leave,
So you buy it warm, but you refrigerate it as soon
absolutely.
as you
Once it's open and once there's oxygen introduced, it needs to be refrigerated.
And I did not know that.
And so
that's
what
good to know.
eventually happens, and it leads to this vicious cycle of everyone goes to a bar that doesn't know this, and they get a martini, and they pull the Noily Pratt off of the back bar that's been sitting under the lights for 6 months.
with dust on the
and
top.
they put that in there, and they go, Jesus Christ, this is terrible. I guess I don't like vermouth.
Gotcha.
And so then what happens? The bar never goes through its vermouth, so they don't have to buy
Right, so it
anymore.
keeps sitting up
So
there.
literally no one ever gets to taste a cocktail the way it should be with fresh quality ingredients.
See, these are the things you learn on Smoking and Toasted. This is important stuff.
Like that's one of the single most important things that you can do at home is if you're making martinis, if you're making Manhattans, or any of the derivatives of those, once that vermouth is open, store it in your fridge.
Do you use a dry vermouth for martinis or sweet?
Dry.
Dry for martinis.
Yep.
But what you did here was sweet, correct?
So sweet vermouth. So this is basically they're just one is based on red wine, one is based on white wine.
Okay.
So
sweet is based on white wine, I would assume, and
no, the other way around.
no other way around.
Yeah,
Okay.
or as they were commonly known in the old cocktail menus as French and Italian vermouth.
Okay.
And so they serve different purposes. So the dry vermouth tends to be a little more kind of herbal, a little bit more bitter. The sweet vermouth has a sugar component to it. It's a little bit darker, so it complements like oak aged spirits, whiskey, and cognac and rum and things like that. So we've already added 1 ounce, so 1 part of our sweet vermouth. We're going to add some bitters. This is a little cheater top, so I have to add twice the amount. So 2
Okay.
dashes.
And this is what kind of bitters?
This is just this is a house-made aromatic because this is what I grabbed at the bar before I came
like
over
an
here.
Angostura, I would say.
It's similar to Angostura. And then just to show that I'm not using any sort of tricks or chicane or anything that you
Nothing
can't
up
buy.
your sleeve, folks.
Like and I wanted to make this in a way that people might make them at home. So I'm actually using a much nicer whiskey than I would make at the bar. So we're using Wild Turkey Long Branch.
Okay, so but at the bar you might use just a sort of a
So at the bar, I'd probably like my general go-to is something like Maker's Mark or Buffalo Trace, something in
Okay.
that nice, reasonable, good,
right. good
thing.
quality,
Good
but
whiskey.
not
But
expensive.
I know a
Price
lot of
range.
people at home are going to use whatever they have around. And the one thing that I will definitely say, it's okay to use really good whiskey in cocktails. Like
Okay, so this brings up a great question because I was going to ask you this about the rum back when you were doing the daiquiri. You used a 4-year from Florida Cana. Would it have made the cocktail any better if you had used a 12 or an 18, or is it negligible?
Or is it not better and just different?
It's not necessarily better. It's different.
Okay.
It is a really great way of saying it. So you'd have a lot more kind of sweetness coming from like the oak profiles, things like that. The same thing like if you use a rye whiskey instead of a bourbon, you're going to get more spice.
Mm-hmm.
So if you use a bourbon, you're going to get a little bit sweeter cocktail. If you use your $50, $60 ryes, you're going to probably get a better cocktail out of it. And like that's perfectly fine. I don't tend to use them at the bar because I have to charge you a lot of money for them because I have to buy my liquor from liquor stores too.
Right.
Like,
So with the margarita, though, I mean, it's been fairly well established that you don't need to go for the añejo tequila.
absolutely. Yeah.
I think with mixed drinks, though, there's a certain point of diminished returns depending on what you're mixing it with. Like, for
Right.
instance, if you're mixing it with Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola will mask a ton of stuff that you get in a really higher-end whiskey, whereas if you mix it with Jack Daniels, it's fine.
It's fine, yeah.
And Jack Daniels has enough harshness to cut through it and add to the
and
flavor.
give you that whiskey and Coke.
But if you take, for instance, Buffalo Trace, which is about the same price point, and mix it with it, it's different. It's not you're kind of masking that Buffalo Trace because it's a little more, what's the word I'm looking for, complex.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think that depending on what you're mixing, that's going to make the difference.
Well, I think the difference between something like a whiskey and Coke or like, Dark and Stormies and Cuba Libres and highballs and things like that, those tend to be more about, just like you're talking about, they're more alcohol delivery systems than they are really well thought out. Like,
actual mixed drinks, right?
Sure, if you go to some cocktail bars, like you can get a Cuba Libre with a Mexican Coke, they take it a little more seriously. That's perfectly fine. But when you're talking and you're going out and getting things like Manhattans and martinis and whiskey sours and old fashions, these are cocktails that are engineered to show off the main spirit.
Yeah.
They're not by design.
Right. It's not so
meant
much
to
about
cover them up.
the blend. It's about taking that main spirit and enhancing it.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with like what we call the 1-in-1. The whiskey and Coke, the gin and tonic. I drink a lot of gin and tonics. Like, they're phenomenal. And you can play around with different tonics and different gins, and you get this different experience.
I get this gin from Smithville called Dirty June from Bone Spirits. That's
I think I've heard of it. I don't think I've had it.
It's so good.
Is it?
Yeah.
We had a
Next time we hang, I'll bring a bottle.
We had a very good gin on the show a couple of weeks ago. Was the one that why can't I think of the name of it? It was the one we know we impacted sales.
That was it had a funny name.
Yeah, it was a. Okay, I'll have to go back and look now. This is just a brain fart. That's the reason I'm not calling it back up. It was really good though. We enjoyed it. It was very. It was nice and floral without being like over the top lavender. It was a very good. Was a very good gin.
I mean, gin's such an
interesting
incredibly
ones we've
diverse category.
Yeah,
There's so many like ways to play around with it. So what I've done here, I've built 2 different martinis. And anyone who's ever watched James Bond or is in any way, shape, form, or fashion in pop culture knows the old phrase "shaken but not stirred."
Mm-hmm.
He's dead wrong. Dead wrong. Ironically, he literally did that to show like that he was a rebel, not because it was proper technique. Like,
by the way, Gastro Gin was what we had.
Gastro Gin. I was just trying to
Gin.
look it up. Yeah.
It was a Dutch dry gin from.
I remember hearing you
from
talk
Holland.
about that.
Yeah, it was really good. So what you're saying is the whole shaken but not stirred martini thing.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily make a better martini. That was James Bond saying, "I'm going to do it my way."
Yeah.
Interesting.
Everyone associates the martini and the Vesper with the James Bond, but throughout the history of the works by Ian Fleming, the most ordered cocktail by James Bond, Scotch and soda.
Interesting.
Ah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Good to know.
That one's just not as sexy when Daniel Craig says it.
Right.
So,
and you kind of get it. Like it almost became a thing with the James Bond movies,
Yeah.
more so than the Fleming books.
Exactly. And the reason that I've done this with the Manhattan is I don't think any cocktail shows off the shaken versus stirred dichotomy nearly as well as a Manhattan.
And you made both of these the exact same,
exact same way.
So you
same
got
whiskey,
one
same
that's
vermouth,
shaken?
same bitters. One's going to be shaken. One's going to be stirred.
This is awesome. I can't wait to try to tell.
And we can show off a little bit of like multitasking, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I like that. I like
They
that.
talk about
Quick,
pat
ask me
your
a math
head and
problem.
rub your belly, right?
I have trouble walking and chewing gum, so I wouldn't be that good at this. But
Well, I like that this chair has some bounce when we do this.
yeah.
Or maybe that's just the Sazerac talking.
Yeah, it was the same thing Alan Denny said last week, though. So
Kill it with fire.
He totally owned that chair.
all right, so this is the shake.
So this is the shake in Manhattan. This is how a lot of people grow up learning from like their grandfather how to make it.
Okay.
So these are for you.
I tell you, it just looks delicious. I mean, if you just take a look at that, that looks like a concoction for the gods right there. And now it's going to look completely different because the one you're pouring
Look
there,
how clean and clear that looks.
yeah, it almost looks like straight
this
whiskey.
is so aerated
I'll just show that one.
that
to the
it's
camera.
fuzzy.
Yeah, fascinating. All right, I'm excited to try the difference.
So that tastes like a Manhattan.
Yes.
It's kind of watery though. It's a little on the weak side. It's a fine drink.
I like it. Wow.
Ooh.
So the stirred one punches through a whole lot more.
You taste the whiskey a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of the rule of thumb with shaking versus stirring is if anything in your drink makes the drink cloudy, whether it's citrus or egg white or dairy, you want to or olive brine, you want to shake the drink. If
I was going to say my dirty martinis are definitely cloudy after I shake
yeah,
them.
absolutely. If when you pour it into your vessel of choice, it's a clear drink, you want to stir it because it preserves the clarity and really lets you catch the nuance. Like you get like a nice whiskey flavor on a shaken Manhattan. You can't taste the vermouth.
Correct.
There's a lot more depth of complexity. Like I think the aeration actually detracts a little bit. And so
There's a lot in the middle of the palate that's missing on that.
yeah.
So what are other drinks that we may have a tendency to shake that would be more interesting if we stirred them?
The gin martini, if you're assuming you're using vermouth, that drink, because we tend to drink it so dry, we use a lot less vermouth these days than we used to because again that whole vicious cycle that we went through, not as big of an offender because eventually that air will settle out and you'll be left with the same drink, but it takes 30 minutes to get there and then you have like a warm version of your drink when you could already be on your second cocktail. But I always think that this is a really good experiment to see side by side because when you first taste the shaken whiskey Manhattan, you're like, this tastes like a fine drink.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And then you taste the stirred version and you just go, oh my God, this is something completely different.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right because that was the first one that I had. And I was like, well, this is very,
It's amazing
very
how
good.
much different it looks.
Yeah. I think the biggest impact when someone first sees it for the first time is fresh out of the shaker when it's still kind of murky. And then you see it come out of the mixing glass, and it's just crystal clear.
crystal clear,
and,
yeah.
This sexy red tint.
Yeah, it really almost looks like a whiskey and water.
This
Yeah.
looks like a beer.
Yeah.
Right. Right. It really does. Well, that is fascinating. And they both taste great, but you're right. The flavors are more pronounced.
Yeah.
And you can detect the vermouth much better in the stirred version than you can in the shaken.
Yeah, and like if you're using again like a nicer whiskey, you're wanting to get those nuances. You're wanting that whiskey to shine through. So like stirring it is absolutely the way to kind of do that and get you there.
Would a stirred margarita be worth anything, or does that need to be shaken?
I think it needs to be shaken.
And
like-
what is it about that drink that makes shaken better?
The lime juice. And again, like
It-
fresh squeezing that lime,
It causes the
getting
lime
those
juice
oils.
to like expand and the oils to
Yeah.
Okay,
You know,
that makes sense.
And like it's another experiment that you can do at home. Like make you 2 margaritas and stir one of them, and then shake the other, and then you'll never do the first way again.
And then you're drinking for science.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
and what we found out today was thanks to James Bond, we've been doing our martinis all wrong.
That's right.
All right,
I mean, like I say wrong just from like a classical,
of course, yeah.
perspective.
If you enjoy it, it's not wrong.
Yeah,
so.
if you enjoy it, absolutely drink it however the hell you want.
Well, again, Smoking and Toasting, not only directly influencing sales, but also educational.
That's right.
That's we've
The
received-
more you know,
the dee-dee-dee-dee.
or knowing is half the battle.
I like that better. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. A little more cocktails, and we have another beer to try on this next segment. This is going to be, and it should be interesting to see how this pairs up with some of the things that we've been trying today. We'll be trying a really interesting Imperial Stout that is a peanut butter marshmallow Imperial Stout called Fluffernuttergus. I said that better after
Say that again?
I said it better after the cocktails than I did earlier on in the show before we started. We'll be right back. It's Smoking and Toasting.
Cocktails. I have to do this.
Welcome back. It's Smoking and Toasting, show number 201. We are halfway to 500 and thrilled to be there. It's
Halfway to 500. Oh, we're halfway to 300.
see, we're already well past halfway to 300, so we'll set our sights higher. Halfway to 500. Will you be just absolutely shocked if this show makes it to 500 episodes?
To 500 episodes.
Oh.
That means we, sir, are tenacious.
Yeah, and it means we've had a lot of beer and spirits, is what it'll also mean. We are thrilled to be coming to you talking about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. We're thrilled to have Mixologist Extraordinaire, Chris Morris, joining us on the program today, making stuff.
That guy's awesome.
And we are also thrilled to be sponsored by MyCigarShirts.com. That's MyCigarShirts.com with all kinds of cool T-shirts for cigar lovers. You'll enjoy them, you'll appreciate them, and you'll support our sponsor, and that'll be very cool. All right, Ian, you said that there's a good chance we'll have a sponsor. Well, not a sponsor. We'll have a jingle prepared, a theme song for Drinking News next week.
Next week, yes.
So do you want to do one
No.
last a cappella performance?
This is yours.
You going to make me do the last one?
This is your last one.
All right.
After this,
Ian
things
promises
will be different.
and better. Drinking News is the segment on the program where we try to bring you a story that
I'm not promising better.
may or may not be about drinking, but certainly is probably more enjoyable if you are drinking. And we call it Drinking News. Drinking News. Now it's time for Drinking News, baby. Ian, I think you're going to love this week's Drinking News.
Talk to me. What's happening?
A Florida man.
I love it already. Any story that starts with a Florida man.
A Florida man in Panama City was charged with burglary earlier this year when he crashed his car into a bar so he could steal a Dr. Pepper. Police
Dr. Pepper?
Police found the man sitting in the bar, sitting and drinking his Dr. Pepper with his car crashed through one of the bar's walls.
I thought Dr. Pepper was just that big in Texas. I didn't know Florida was.
Well, we've heard about the Dr. Pepper shortage.
Yeah.
But this guy, leave it to Florida man to take matters into his own hands. By the way, also in his own hands, he had a gun, so it made it an armed burglary. So not only is he breaking and entering and theft for the Dr. Pepper, but now armed burglary because of the gun. So that's really all there is to the story.
What can make a man want a Dr. Pepper so bad?
I will tell you, I've wanted a Dr. Pepper pretty bad at different points in time of my life. But,
See, I feel like that just needs to be a slogan. Just like a picture of this guy's mugshot, and then just like
but by the way,
this beautiful deep voice.
Did you put
what
that
can
up
make
already,
a man want
Adam?
a Dr. Pepper so bad?
Put that mugshot up again for me one more time. So there he is. There's the dude right there. That guy wanted a Dr. Pepper bad.
He wanted it AF.
Yeah, he certainly did. So there you go. Today's Drinking News. Not much to the story, but because it started with a Florida man, it's one of the more
That
special
makes me happy.
Drinking News stories that we've had in quite some time. And we're enjoying the drinking. We're enjoying the Drinking News. And Ian, I think we should start, since Chris is going to give us a cocktail that has never been tasted before, other than by
The cocktail
people
to end all
who work for him.
cocktails.
Maybe we should start with the beer, and then we'll end the show with the cocktail. This beer looks like something special.
I'm about to open something called Fluffernuttergus.
Fluffernuttergus. I really can't say it better now that I've had some of these Manhattans.
Yeah, I mean, whiskey was once considered medicinal in this country.
Well, it's certainly working for me.
Yeah, like in Prohibition, literally, you could have so. There were a number of distilleries that were still allowed to produce whiskey during Prohibition on the premise of it being medicinal.
Malort was medicinal.
Malort is medicinal, actually. Yeah.
Yes,
It's
yes.
medicine for my soul.
It'll keep
I'm one of those very strange. I absolutely love Malort.
you
You really
Yeah,
do?
I do.
You
I
actually,
have
you actually
Malort and
drink it
Chris
for
Hart.
pleasure.
Yes.
And Alan Denny
And me
Cruz
twice.
I've Malorted them.
Yeah, no. The first time I went to Chicago, and I had always heard the stories. And like, I love bitter things: Campari and Fernet and Ramazzotti and Averna. Like, give them all to me in a glass. And I had heard of this thing that was the worst thing mankind had ever created. And in the true epitome of
It is an affront to civility, I have to say.
in the true epitome of highbrow lowbrow, we went to Grace for dinner. This is the year that they had opened.
Yeah,
They now have
yeah.
3 Michelin stars.
Yeah, that's a pretty respectable place.
So, like, we went and dropped a pretty coin on dinner, and then I'm like, all right, we got to find Fernet or Malort. So then we go, like, stumbling looking for a bar because we've had, like, 8 glasses of wine with our tasting. And I'm walking to this bar, and I'm, like, scanning the back bar, and I'm like, there it is.
oh, if you go into a bar in
I'm like-
Chicago, they'll
I'm
have
like,
it.
there it is.
And had you ever tried it before this?
No. And I'm like, you and me, sweetheart. So the bartender comes over, and I prep myself for the worst, and I'm like, I like a shot of Malort and a half pour of Arctic Panzerwolf.
Oh, my God.
Which is a 3 Floyd's 100 IBU double IPA.
Yeah,
I'm like, because
yeah.
if this all goes south, I just want to like crush my mouth with hops.
Drown it in hops.
And like,
Absolutely.
And like insanely high IBU double IPAs are like the only way I know to do that. So I'm like psyching myself up. I'm like, all right, here you go. You got this. And I take it. I'm like, it's pretty good. And
You're,
then,
you're a strange man, Chris Morris.
yeah. And then I just sit back and like casually start sipping my IPA.
That's
I think my feelings toward Malort are best summed up by the slogan that Ian found that.
There was
that
a
goes
great
along with it.
Thrillist article that had a list of fan-made
yeah.
slogans. Have you read that?
Yeah, it tastes like getting picked on in the 3rd grade.
Malort, tonight's the night you fight your dad. Or Malort, these pants won't shit themselves.
Some of the greatest slogans ever. Well, I'm certainly hoping that the Fluffernuttergus
Smells
is not
amazing.
Malort-like.
You
Yeah.
just smell it in the whole room
Yeah,
now.
So
This
we've
is
had-
not Malort.
Ian, we've had White Elm beers on the show before,
Yes.
at least one. I remember this. They are out of Lincoln, Nebraska. And I always say, if you live in Lincoln, Nebraska, you might as well open a brewery and make great craft beer, because what else is there to do in Lincoln, Nebraska?
My God.
Yeah? It smells like a peanut butter cup.
Let me put it this way. Mm-hmm. There is obviously nothing better to do in Lincoln, Nebraska than make this badass beer. Mm-hmm. This is so good.
Wow, it really is.
I've had a lot of beers that are peanut butter or marshmallow or whatever.
And some of them
this
are better
one
than
has
others.
a balance to it that I've never had in a peanut butter marshmallow beer ever. Like, the only thing that even comes close to how well this is made is the 512 Pecan Porter.
That's a great
which
beer.
is absolutely amazing.
Yes.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you want to catch felony? Because this is 12.5%. And I feel like we're going to do felonious things. So this beer is amazing.
We're going to eat sushi and not pay, man.
Yeah. I'm telling you, though, what's interesting about this is that you get total peanut butter cup on the front, and then you get this really toasted, almost like burnt marshmallows, like somebody took that torch that you have and toasted the top of the marshmallows on the finish, and it's just a really, like you said,
But it's not
well-balanced.
overly sweet either.
No, it's not. And you get the graininess
and
of the
it
chocolate.
still tastes like beer. Mm-hmm. This is probably one of the best of its kind that I've ever had.
Is it really 12%?
It is
right?
12.5%.
Oh, 12.5%. Wow. White Elm, you have outdone yourself, my
Holy
friends.
cow.
Wow. And
Keep cold, drink fresh, it says.
Not a
Wow.
problem.
yeah.
Peanut, butter, marshmallow, Imperial Stout contains nuts. Yeah, 12.5%. Ooh. Our original adjunct stout just got a fresh pair of kicks. The sticky sweet toasted marshmallow flavors of Fluffernuttergus paired with creamy salty peanut butter.
Well,
It is really outstanding. Like, I am blown away by this beer. This
it is really, really terrific. One of the best stouts I think we've had on the show in a very long time. And we've
I
had
had
some good
one not
stouts on
too
the
long
show.
ago that was peanut butter and jelly that was pretty good. But this, like I said, there's the way they balance this. There's something about this where you taste everything. It's not too sweet. It's not too much of one, too much of the other.
And the chocolate flavor on it is amazing.
It's delicious chocolate.
Yeah.
It's a dark, bitter chocolate
which is my
with
favorite
the sweet
kind.
marshmallow, like burnt marshmallows.
Honestly, this should
outstanding.
be held up as the, when you're going to brewer's school, if there is such a thing, this should be held up as the gold standard of stouts that have coffee or chocolate flavors to them.
There is definitely a brewing school. My brother-in-law has a degree in brewing. He also has a degree in theology, so he's basically the closest thing to a real-life monk that I know.
I was going to say he's perfectly balanced.
Oh, no,
there.
it was
Could be
super,
the modern day Saint Arnold.
yeah, no, it was super fantastic. It was a one-stop shop. So not only did he do the ceremony at my wedding, but he also brewed the beer for it.
Oh,
Nice.
That's awesome. So I didn't know Ian that well. We'd met and got together a couple of times when I went to his wedding, but I told him at the wedding, I was like, this wedding has the greatest beer of any wedding I've ever been to. And it really, really, truly was amazing.
I had two kegs. I had the Goliad Golden, which is really good, and I had something darker.
Mm-hmm.
I'm blanking on what it was, but
All I know is I drank a whole bunch of it.
yeah, and I had good beer at my wedding, and we had beer during the wedding. So my wedding was
Your
basically
ceremony included beer, which
Yeah.
is awesome.
also included beer, but my wedding was set up such that if you didn't have a beer in your hand while we were getting married, then that was your fault. And we basically what we did is we threw a party and we interrupted it with about 10 minutes of ceremony.
That sounds very, very
Totally.
close to what we did.
Yeah.
Totally the way that it should be. Totally the way that it should be. Well, Chris, I got to tell you, I didn't mean to to pull out such an amazing beer before your final
the
cocktail.
pressure is
'Cause
on.
I feel like the bar has been elevated just a bit here. But man, that was good, and I'm hoping that this cocktail will live up to the challenge. Now, I wanted to
Unreal.
ask you this a little bit earlier. When you come up with a new cocktail, is it head-based, recipe-based, or is it trial and error
Came to
behind
you
the
in
bar?
a dream.
Yeah. How does it happen?
So it's all completely dependent. Like sometimes I just see like an ingredient and I'm like, I want to make something with this. That happens a lot. I'll shop at a lot of like Asian grocery stores, things like 99 Ranch, Vietwa, H Mart, and like
H Mart is awesome, by the way.
yeah. So like I'll find something that like I'm not familiar with, and I'm like, all right, like this is $5, so like I'm gonna buy it and I'm gonna drink with it, and see what happens basically. And then sometimes like we'll be pouring through like some old cocktail manual and find some like really obscure classic that like sounds super interesting. And then like maybe you make that and then update it for like the modern palate.
Put a twist on it.
That's
for the
how
modern palate.
this one started.
Okay.
And then you make it and you're like, okay, that's cool, but now we got to try it this way.
What if we
and
did
then,
this?
And then
Yeah.
we got to try it this way. And my kind of personal philosophy when it comes to cocktails is I will tweak and I will tweak and I will tweak, and I will not stop until I make the cocktail worse.
He will tweak and tweak until his tweaker is sore.
So
Right.
yeah, so I
But
will.
that's
I will
interesting what he said. When he makes the cocktail worse,
Then
then
I
you stop and back up, right?
Then I undo the last step and I stop because I reached a logical conclusion.
That
Yeah.
makes so much
And
sense.
sometimes that takes days, sometimes that takes weeks, months, sometimes it's even taken years. Like I've got a cocktail that I do at the bar that I don't have on the menu that I've been serving for 5 years, and I've been evolving the recipe for 5 years at
As
this
you
point.
go, yeah.
And the presentation.
And you haven't made it worse yet, so you haven't stopped.
and I have not made it worse yet.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, this one is called, what's the name
This
again?
is called the Enemy Combatant.
I love the name. And how did you choose that name for it?
So this one is based on one of those old school cocktails that like I started updating for the modern palate. So in Charles Baker's Gentleman's Companion 1939, there's a cocktail called the Burnt Fuselage,
Another great cocktail.
which is actually attributed to an American pilot. I don't remember his name. I think it was Ken. You would think I'd be more researched after 4 cocktails.
Well, I was actually
and some 12% beer.
I was
But-
actually really impressed with some of the names and dates you were reeling out earlier. I was like, okay, yeah, we just come in and taste beers and cocktails, and you're laying history on us.
So he was often known for when he got done with his mission, he would have a cocktail of his creation called a Burnt Fuselage, which was equal parts cognac, dry vermouth, and Grand Marnier,
Okay.
which sounds interesting. Like
Yes.
like I know what those things taste like. I don't really generally mix them together, so I mix them together because you got to do the research. You got to drink the drinks.
Yes.
I like that you take your job seriously.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's important.
Somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do
important.
it. I've got a wonderful, beautiful, amazing gin martini on my menu that we actually serve pre-batched and frozen, and it's as cold as I can possibly legally serve you a martini. I'm pretty convinced.
All right, then I'm coming in to get one.
And I tell people all the time, I'm like, because I have to freeze this overnight. Like for like 2 weeks, I had to drink a martini every single day. That's how much I love you people.
It's
sacrifices
dedication.
that I make.
It's sacrifice and dedication. That's what
I just want you to know our appreciation for what you do.
I appreciate that. So this started as the Burnt Fuselage because I like those old historical cocktails that because as I mentioned earlier, like sometimes I'm a bartender, sometimes I'm a storyteller. I like to often say like I'm a storyteller with liquid literature. And so like stories like that are really important. They help sell the cocktail. And so I started with the Burnt Fuselage and it was fine. But, it's 2020 and I have way more cool shit than they had in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it. And eventually I found a Burnt Fuselage that I liked and I put it on my menu. And then like overnight I was like, oh my God, I didn't taste this with this style of vermouth. We have to do this tomorrow. And then that went completely off the rails. And like 3 hours later I had a completely different cocktail. And then 2 days later I had a completely different cocktail called the Enemy Combatant.
Okay,
Nice.
I love it.
So it was just one of those that we started with a classical structure and then just kept tweaking and experimenting until we found what we felt was a really phenomenal cocktail.
So, I figure you'll appreciate this story. We're talking about the martini and how cold you can make it. My brother lives in International Falls, Minnesota, which is
Speaking of how cold can you make it?
the average coldest place in the continental United States.
Wow.
he will make what he calls a Sub-Zero martini, where he takes his glass and his ingredients and sticks it in the snow outside when it's, -0 or -30 or whatever. Ridiculous. Like if your hands are exposed outside, they're going to freeze.
That's very close to what I do. So I take gin, dry vermouth, and then some Nuoc Cham bitters that I make, which is the Vietnamese fish sauce, the like dipping.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
What I like to call the Vietnamese ketchup.
So you make bitters out of it?
I make a bitters out of that.
Wow.
So I add those into a bottle with a 1/4 ounce of water because I need to do some kind of dilution, and then I put it directly into my deep freezer. And then when you get the cocktail, I serve a variety of house-made pickles to the side. I pour you a glass that is completely crystallized, coming fresh out of the freezer, and I pour you this completely frozen gin concoction.
Oh, that sounds so good.
It's got the viscosity of syrup.
I was going to say the gin
Yeah.
comes like glopping out of there.
Yeah,
Well, sure, because if you keep your gin or vodka in the freezer to make martinis, it does come out
Yeah.
syrupy when you
Yeah.
pour it into the
Yeah,
shaker.
this was kind of inspired by the Duke's Martini in London, which is something that we legally can't serve in Texas, or otherwise we definitely would. So there they pull your glass directly out of the freezer. And it'll probably be by this wonderful older Italian guy, Alessandro Palazzi. And he pours a little bit of vermouth in your glass, and he swirls it around, and he throws it out on the carpet. And he insists that he throws it on the carpet. He puts your glass in front of you, and he pulls a bottle of gin directly out of the freezer, and then proceeds to fill your glass up. That's it. There's no stirring. There's no shaking. There is just, pouring of frozen gin.
Now let me ask you this question. I've talked about this on the show before. On the Netflix series Grace and Frankie, Jane Fonda's character goes to a bar and is drinking martinis, and she asks the bartender, "What is your secret? You make the best martinis I've ever had." And the bartender proceeds to tell her secret is that she doesn't wash out the shaker in between the different drinks she makes. That's her secret. Is that...
No.
That's bullshit, isn't it?
That's absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
He was
all right.
like, no.
Yeah, I had a feeling...
Bad bartender. Bad.
I had a feeling it made for like a good line in the show, but didn't have a lot of basis in reality.
Yeah, that's like seasoning your grill. You still got to clean it.
Yeah, right. You can't just leave all the crap on it. You have to clean it off at some point. Okay, gotcha. I'm glad I got to ask that question of someone that would really know. All right, so tell me the ingredients you're putting in here.
All right, so the first thing we're doing, we're sticking true to the original, so we're using cognac.
Okay.
So Pierre Ferrand, 1840. So we use...
Somewhere Doc's is smiling.
I love that guy so much.
He's awesome.
He's so fun, isn't he?
All right, so
He may not even be watching the show. He's just sitting there and goes,
Right. Yeah, I have a feeling he's feeling it.
So we're
somewhat.
sticking somewhat with our pilot's original recipe. And by the way, he eventually was shot down. So that was kind
Oh man.
he lived and
I hate
he
hearing that.
came back home. But that was again
Okay.
kind of the genesis of the name, because I know eventually he was actually shot down and was considered an enemy combatant.
Okay.
So that's kind of where the lineage of the name comes from. So we've got cognac. We're doing an ounce. We're bringing everything else down a little bit just to let the cognac shine through. I think the modern day palate wants to taste the spirit a little bit more, just because we have really great spirits available to us.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 3/4 ounce of a blend of Japanese ume brandy, which is a type of plum. It's very tart that they have, as well as Pierre Ferrand dry curacao. So referencing that Grand Marnier, that orange. So you've got the orange, you've got plum. We're still seeing like that wonderful citrus family.
Got it.
Instead of dry vermouth, we're using what's called Bonal, which is similar to vermouth, but it's a little bit more bitter. This one in particular, bittered with both gentian and quinine. So it's not only sharp, but it's very earthy as well. And it's got that kind of wine influence. So again, all referencing kind of the cognac and kind of those original things. And then I don't think a fuselage can be very burnt without something smoking. So we actually used Lapsang Souchong tea.
And now we know why you brought the torch.
Exactly. Well, no, actually the torch is for some more smoke.
Oh, okay.
Because I think, as I told you earlier, you can't come on smoking and toasting and not do a smoked cocktail.
Okay, fair
That
enough.
just seems amateur. So we actually use a 1/4 ounce of a Lapsang Souchong tea,
Okay.
which is a Chinese origin black tea that's actually smoked. So it's often called like the Isla Scotch of the tea world.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So when people get into tea, they get into like, your black teas and your greens, but Lapsang Souchong is like that obscure,
It's the
smoky
peated version
It's
of
like
the-
the
yeah.
peated version of black tea.
Got it.
And so we
I
use a
love
little bit of
peated
that just to
whiskey.
impart some actual smoke flavor in the cocktail. And then for aromatics, we're actually going to smoke the glasses with some bamboo smoke.
Okay.
So it wasn't just a disinfect from Al and Denny. There was a functional reason for having a blowtorch today.
All right. So you said bamboo smoke?
Bamboo.
And so how do you create that?
So I just take I literally take bamboo and I just just regular
Kind of burn off the end of it?
No, we actually just have little pieces of bamboo right here
pieces of bamboo. Got
that
it.
we cut down, and then we're gonna burn this with the torch. We're gonna put the glass over the top of it. These are some actual Japanese teacups.
Okay.
And this is the exact presentation that we do at the bar. And so this just gives us some like additional aromatic qualities.
Little smoke.
This
yeah.
room's about to smell fantastic.
Yeah, as smells go, that's a good
Oh, and you
one.
put the cup on there upside down to really get the smoke inside the cup.
Love it. You're right. The room is smelling great all of a sudden. Yeah. That's incense right there. Wonderful. All right. So this seems like a fairly large amount of trouble to go to make a cocktail.
It's a medium amount.
A medium amount. Okay. All right.
I've definitely done much more laborious cocktails in my day, but at the end, like the amount of effort doesn't matter. It's the end product that matters to me.
So when a cocktail is priced on a cocktail menu, obviously the more expensive the ingredients that are in it, the higher the price would be. But is there an allowance for how difficult it is to make?
With certain cocktails, yes. If you start talking things like the most infamous example is the Ramos Gin Fizz. It takes 8 to 10 minutes to make.
Yeah.
It's a giant pain in the ass. So like you're gonna pay me $20 to do that.
Got it.
And it's because it's basically of how many other cocktails I can make in 20 minutes.
Right.
So if one of my arms is doing this for
It only
10
makes
minutes,
sense,
like,
right? Yeah.
But other than that, like I don't generally build that in. So if I do like think cocktails with egg whites that take a little bit of like additional time to them, I don't generally price those higher. I just put them like lower on my menu in ways that like psychologically they won't get ordered as much.
Got it. That makes sense.
But we make a really good effort to keep our cocktails affordable. I think the most expensive cocktail on our menu is $12.
That's not bad.
This one is a $12 cocktail. That daiquiri is $10. So we find that cocktails are a lot better if people drink them, and if they're
Right.
not crazy
People don't-
expensive, people tend to drink them a little bit more.
So I noticed you stirred that for a very long time.
Right, but I'm doing 3 at once.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so it just takes a little bit of extra time for all that ice to melt. That's why we're using like this big, 1.5 liter Italian Gallone.
Which is a beautiful little canister, by the way. Now, those have been smoked, and you're pouring in from up high. Is there something to the height that you're pouring from? Does that cause it to
There is actually a little
distribute
bit.
itself differently inside the cup?
It's less about that and more about the fact that there is a wine component to the drink, the Bonal.
Okay.
And so just like with wine, you want to aerate just a little bit.
So that's giving it a little bit of aeration on its way
Yeah.
down to the cup.
That's just one of those like kind of very, very nuanced touches that they make a minor effect in the end drink, but if they're not that big of an effort to do, why not take the time to do them?
Makes sense. Well, Ian, we've had a number of different styles of glass, and our beer cups, but this one is an actual Japanese teacup, right?
I know, it's pretty awesome looking too.
Well, I can tell you right off the bat, this smells completely different
Oh, wow.
from any cocktail I've ever had.
I don't even know what to say.
You get the bamboo smokiness on the nose,
Yeah.
but you also can get a little sense of what's beneath there, too. Fascinating. I will say it's super cold, and I wasn't necessarily expecting that.
I was not expecting refreshingly delicious.
Yeah.
I was expecting delicious, but not refreshingly light.
Right.
I think the cocktail plays with the mind a little bit because you see like this black teacup and smoke and you're thinking fire. So you're expecting like
I'm expecting something completely
you're
different,
expecting
to be honest.
tea.
Yeah,
But
right.
but you do get like this cold, fruity, refreshing beverage. And I always like when a cocktail plays with your expectations as well. I think it
That's delicious.
makes life a little more interesting.
Delicious in a completely different way from the others. Like it's a completely different style of cocktail. But like you said, Ian, much more of a refreshing, sort of clean on the palate vibe than I was
that
expecting.
smoke really plays with the palate too, because
Well, it does.
It's there every time you bring the glass to your nose. You get that smoke right off the bat.
How different is this from the burning fuselage that you burnt fuselage?
Burnt fuselage.
Burnt fuselage. How different is this from that original one that you sort of started with?
It's quite different.
Okay.
So instead of just using an orange liqueur, it's we use a reduced amount of fruit liqueur, and we split it 50-50 between orange and plum. We don't use a dry vermouth. We use a Gentianchino wine and the tea, and we reduce the amounts of both of those from being an equal parts cocktail to being 4 parts to 3 to 3, and then smoking in the glass. If it was super similar, like occasionally I'll just be like, yeah, I just like this drink with like maybe a bar spoon of this or a little more sugar. I'll generally keep the name. But once you start messing with the DNA of a cocktail,
change it.
I think you have to change the name of the cocktail.
It's almost like a sort of a refreshing, sort of boozy citrus drink, but
Yeah,
it's
the
got a peated
orange,
whiskey vibe to it.
And then,
you know?
did you say plum on the background?
Yeah.
The plum is so interesting because it's such a, like, you get all the brightness from the citrus right up front, and then when it finishes, it just closes down with this real dark, fruity kind of thing.
and that's where the peat
And it-
kind of
yeah.
comes in. That
One of my
that
favorite things
smokiness.
about this drink, and I know you talk about it a lot, is actually the pay attention to the retro hail.
Yeah.
That's where you really get like,
Right.
the elements of that smoked tea.
Well, and it's one of
The tea
greatest
part of it
ways-
is super delicious.
whether you're smoking a cigar or whether you're enjoying a craft beer or a spirit or a cocktail like this, I always think of the retro hail as that's the freebie. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like you get it totally for free. It's like after you've taken your drink, for no extra cost, you get to enjoy that sensation of just how it feels coming back out the nose.
Smoky retro hail is real good. I could see this going with a cigar on the lighter side really, really well, or
Oh, yeah.
Candela wrapper cigar.
Yes.
I could see that happening really, really well.
I don't know if this is going to work or not, but would you pour me just a touch more of that Imperial Stout, the Fluffernuttergus? I think maybe I didn't pronounce it as well that time, so maybe it's the law of diminishing returns beginning to kick in. I didn't know what it would be like to go back to
I'm
this.
going to wait to see what you say because I don't think they're going to be flavor compatible.
Well, I'll say this doesn't taste any worse,
Still good.
but it almost just changes you. It's like you walked into another room. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's not something where the two are necessarily working together, but I was curious
Let's
because
see what happens when you go back to it.
well, it is interesting because it introduces almost maybe because it's just still on the palate. There's almost a chocolate note added
Yeah.
to what this tastes like, which actually works just fine.
Yeah,
I don't know if it makes it
I can
better,
see
but it works just fine. Well, Chris, I'll tell you, this has been quite an adventure. I don't know for sure why we waited so long to do this, but that's on us, and we will not wait so long next time to have you back. Now, I'm really serious about trying to set up a sort of a gin versus vodka martini challenge.
Do you have somebody who swears by vodka martinis?
Is there anybody?
somebody.
Because it seems to me all the purists that I meet are gin martini people.
I mean, I'd have to ask. I mean, I had somebody that did, but that's because they literally worked for a vodka company. But
Well, it happens.
I could ask around. But
All right, let's do some investigating because I would love to have someone in who really believed that their vodka martinis were as good or better than gin martinis, and then we could really put it to the test. You know what I mean? I don't know which will win, and I don't really care. I'm looking forward to tasting.
We just want to drink martinis.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well,
That's an Uber show. That's
Chris, are there times that people can find you behind the bar specifically, or does your schedule always vary and fluctuate?
I am there Wednesday through Saturday, open to close.
Open to close. Okay.
So I am very, very easy to find.
So if I were to come in and say, make me something new, what would you do?
I mean, we would talk a little bit about like the cocktails that you enjoy. I occasionally get people that do that. I have a lot of people that have followed me from bar to bar, and at this point, there's literally like you barman drink. And I don't ask questions. I just kind of like, I'm like, all right, I saw like this cool classic cocktail, or like I got this new spirit and I want to play with it. But otherwise, like we'll have a quick conversation about like, what do you like? What are you feeling? And like I'll take things like the weather outside into consideration, right? Like if it's super hot outside, I'm not going to serve you like some stirred, bitter, or like, peated whiskey drink. Like that's not serving like what's going on in the
Ian's
world.
like, why not?
Yeah.
But yeah, I get it.
I will drink this outside in the sun. I don't care.
But that's also like why I ask questions. Like if someone comes in and I'm like, hey, like what kind of drinks do you like? What are you feeling? You're like, I want smoke. I'm like, all right, let's do this. Like,
Yeah,
let's get you some smoke. Like
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up the show, I did want to give you a chance to respond because, a number of drinks in on last week's show, and with our buddy Alan Denny here, we did kind of disparage you a little bit and tell a joke or two at your expense, simply because I'd known you.
It was a fine joke.
Yeah, I'd known you to be at more than one employer, but in all fairness, you've been at this particular spot for quite some time, haven't you?
A couple months.
Okay, that's what I define that as quite some time.
Yeah, no, the first thing I did when I walked in this morning was I looked at Ian and I said, I just want you to know, I haven't been fired in 2020.
All I know is when I said that last week, Alan Denny laughed harder than I've ever seen him laugh before, and I've known him for a while now. So, Chris, thank you so much. I so appreciate you being here and doing this for us. These were all just incredible. I'm not even sure which one I liked the best. They were so good. Did you have a favorite, Ian?
Man, so a couple things that were super enlightening to me. First off, the stirred versus shaken. You'll notice that I still have some of my
some of this shaken, but not
shaken,
the
but the stirred is completely
still got a little
empty.
of each left, but you can see which one went faster.
Yeah. So this one is so intriguing to me.
One of the most interesting cocktails I've ever tasted.
Yes, this one is so intriguing to me and so fun. I don't know if I have a favorite. Well, maybe because the first cocktail that we had
The daiquiri? I loved that.
was so good.
It was just,
I
you
like
think of
that,
daiquiri
and
as
I
being
wanna-
like something you can get anywhere.
I like
You
that,
can't
and
get that
I want to
anywhere.
take that home and share it with my wife kind of way.
Yeah,
The
totally.
old fashioned was enlightening because I'd never had an old fashioned with cognac before.
I like that a
And
lot.
I actually think, like, I may have to start making my old fashions with cognac and see what happens. Because my wife she loves making old fashions, but she almost always makes them with rye, which is what I'm used to. But I think we're
Well,
going
you
to
can make it with literal, like we said, like the original definition of a cocktail is spirit of any kind. You can make, like
Right.
one of my most successful cocktails I've ever done was a gin old fashioned.
Well, it makes me think too that I have that barrel rested gin, that Dirty June barrel rested gin. Makes me think that I really want to try that in an old fashioned as well. It makes, by the way, a badass martini,
yeah.
and you don't need to add much. It's barrel rested, so you just shake it,
You
and put
shake
it in
it
a
up
cup,
and put it in a... I like... That's
You do
my-
what, sir? You do what?
You stir it.
There we
Ian.
go.
Oh
Yeah.
well, yeah. Now I do.
What did we learn today? Stirring.
See how ingrained that is?
By the way, I just want to also pass along before we sign off the show the comment of the day on our social media following content. We were talking about instruments earlier, and Ian was talking about ukuleles and banjos, and Chris spoke up about ukuleles. And our buddy Chris Hart said, only Chris Morris could make ukuleles sound shabby. Which I thought was the quote of the day for today's.
I thought he said snobby.
Oh, did he say snobby? I misread. I'm sorry. He did say snobby.
That's just
You're
the
right.
whiskey talking.
It's
And
the
indeed it
whiskey
is.
talking.
That'd be a good name for a show, The Whiskey Talking.
The whiskey talking.
Yeah, we'll have to keep that in mind. Thank you to everyone who has contributed to the show. Chris Morris, thank you so much for, first of all, bringing all this stuff in because,
Dude.
when we just bring a bottle in and pour it into sampler cups, it's a lot simpler. You went to great lengths to make these for us today, and we appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And it was educational and awesome and everything.
Where's your restaurant
was delicious.
located?
It is 2502 Dunleavy, so right in the heart of Montrose.
Nice.
Right there, just down the street from Anvil and 1/5 and Poison Girl. all these wonderful restaurants that people know, we're literally one street back.
I have a hilarious Poison Girl. Do you know Martine from Poison Girl?
Yeah.
So walk in there, and I'm chatting with Martine, and me and my wife are sitting at the end of the bar, and this girl walks in with her boyfriend, and she leans over to the bar, and she goes, I'll have a Dos Equis. And he goes, we don't have that. She goes, okay, 2 Corona. And he's like, we don't have that. She's like, what do you have? And he goes, we have Lone Star. Obviously seeing what kind of beer she wanted. Like, we have Lone Star. She goes, I'll take 2 of those. So he walks off, and he very professionally gets these beers, and he puts them on the counter next to her. And he turns around, and he starts talking to me and my wife. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this woman, and she's just sitting there tapping the top of her bottle and staring at him. And I look over because it's distracting. And he looks over, and he's like, did you need something? And she goes, can I get lime and salt, please? As if you're supposed to put lime and salt
In a Lone Star.
in a Lone Star.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay. And he just grabs the beer and furiously throws salt on it. Tosses a lime in each one. And he gives it to her, and he just goes, good luck with that. And he walks off. It was so beautiful.
Well, as we were
Who
fond
does
of,
the whole tap the top of the bottle?
yeah,
like,
right.
I'm like,
Well, as we are fond of saying when we sample tequila on this show, no salt nor limes were harmed during the making of this show. Chris, thank you for being here. Thanks to Mary for setting this up. Thanks to Adam, our producer, on the Wheels of Steel today. And Ian, thanks to you, my friend. 201 episodes.
And they haven't
How
stopped us
cool
yet.
is that? Oh, you just made somebody so mad by saying that.
Oh, also, the last time he was on the show was episode 100.
It's true. Yeah. 101 later, and Chris Morris returns. Cheers, my friends.
All right, see you for 302. So one of the times I made Jeremiah laugh career, because Jeremiah used to bartend with me before he ran B&B.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like